Hello, everybody. If it's Wednesday, it's Warhammer, and that must mean it's time for another episode of Warhammer Weekly. Joining me, as always, is truly the man who causes more controversy than anything else in my life. It's Tom. How you doing, buddy?
Hello, friends.
You enjoying your drink there?
My frozen beverage, my mixed frozen beverage.
Sure.
I decided to go all in. My wife's like, "Hey, you wanna make some strawberry daiquiris for us?" And I said, "Yes, I do."
Well, there you go. So Tom's getting liquored up for this episode. So it's just Tom and I tonight because I couldn't, if we're going to cover a thing like this, which tonight we're going to be talking about controversies in Warhammer, I couldn't subject a guest to this. I've kind of had this show in like my back pocket for a little while. I'm enough
for Vince to try to handle.
Well, here's the problem. It's not really keeping a guest in control. It's me not wanting to subject a guest to it because here's the thing, Tom. We're going to take positions tonight and pontificate, right?
Well,
and anytime we take positions on anything, like somebody gets pissed because there's like you could have if we have a 99% positive position, that 1% they are not happy with us for this thing we take. So I'm excited about it. That's always what happens whenever we're like, this thing is pretty good. The people who do not think that they are very motivated to tell us as such.
So you're telling me that we're going to have a lot of thumbs down. And in fact, we already have one.
That's fine. Yes, I noticed that. Say la vie. Yes, I'm sure this will be an episode that garners such attention, but that's fine. This is the goal with what we talk about tonight in our feature segment will be to discuss these things frankly and with nuance, not hopefully comment or not generally comment on the internet because I'm not interested in any kind of flame war or starting fights or anything like that. I think we can just talk a lot of these things through and, just talk about positions and encourage a conversation and discussion, which is always what I'm going for. So there you go. All right. But anyway, first up,
I'm all about raging.
Mm-hmm. Oh, we know.
And anger and inciting violence. Internet violence.
It's be careful there. You're immediately demonetized right there. All right. So at any rate, why don't we start with the news?
Sure.
The non-controversial news. Well, maybe.
So we have a rumor engine.
We do. I'll show it. That's fine. I have the image up. Here you go. So stupid. There. Yep. Any thoughts, Tom? Any idea what this is?
A broken...
Fascinating.
It is the Night Haunt terrain piece for the Night Haunt 2.0 book that's going to get released.
Oh, there you go.
It is part of the... It's part of a graveyard, and so it's part of the iron wrought fence in the graveyard for the Night Haunt release.
Sure. Yep, I agree. That's what it is. No, you remember how last week I was talking about how rumor engines I like versus rumor engines I don't like? Welcome to rumor engines I don't like. That is just nothing. That's nothing. That's not a thing. That's just nothing. That is a hot pile of nothing. So... thank you for that.
So yeah. Vince staking out a controversial position
right away. No, I don't think that's controversial. I like it when rumor engines actually are like, ooh, that could be this thing or this thing. Not, yep, that's a piece of plastic. Okay. It is hilarious to watch you sit there and just suck on that straw. I want you to know that.
It's delightful.
Yeah. You want to actually keep talking now? Because this is the part of the show where you talk. Can you put your beverage down for 2 seconds?
Okay. I don't have a drink to snap open.
Yeah, that which did draw so many comments, by the by, because it was the loudest drink in the history of the world. That was the shot heard around the world.
Yeah, it was
internet soundboards.
We don't normally do sponsorship, but when we do, Coca-Cola.
I guess, yeah. I hope we were sponsored for that. I'm still waiting on that check. Apparently, I don't know where they're at. They never got back in touch with me.
Not at all. Okay, so here we go. other than Rumor Engine, we have Barrack the Indomitable. New Stormcast? Actually, no. That's not the big news. That's not the lead here.
All right. I just put them on in a certain order since I'm the one who did your job in collecting the news today.
The lead with Barrack is that a new green skin model was released.
Oh, the dead guy at his feet?
Yeah, the head. There's a green skin head.
Well, he kind of has part of a torso, too. He hit him pretty hard. Like, there's a little bit of neck and torso there. He got like part of a clavicle to come along with the head. I mean, yeah, you whack somebody hard enough with a grand hammer, and that's what happens. Yeah, Barrack the Indomitable, another store opening or refreshing unique model. Okay,
yeah, it's pretty disappointing. Like, cool, I want a store closing or opening around me.
Sure, refreshing. You mean not open or not closing? I don't think you get them when they close, Tom. I don't think that's they don't celebrate that.
Yeah. Come on, let's shut my GW store down so I get an exclusive mini.
Yeah, don't do that. The person who runs your store is very nice.
She is indeed. I want that mini. Redo my store, GW. I want to buy all the minis.
Sure. As always, the usual stuff. Basically, the same thing we said a couple weeks ago when they did another Stormcast store model. Go back and watch that show and apply all the same statements. Sure.
Indeed.
It's fine. The other one's better. I like the Liberator Prime chick, the one with like the missing glove and stuff. I thought I just like the pose. I think is better in general. I like open models, models like this, like Night Quester style, more than I like models like this. I don't like closed models in general.
They're a pain in the ass to paint the chest when they do that.
Yeah. And then you got to unless you go to sub-assemblies, and then it's just annoying. I don't mind sub-assemblies for like competition stuff, but I hate it when like I'm doing an army and I have to do everything in sub-assemblies. It's just, it's kind of annoying. If there was any redeeming factor to like Witch Elves, it's that they're just generally like all doing this. They were fine. It was fine. People complain about the hair, but you can't see under the hair, so who cares? There you go.
It's true. I still sub-assembled all of their heads. So I got behind. I was actually like painted all of their backs.
Sure. And yes, somebody said Vince loves Slambo. You're darn right. Slambo is like my perfect example of a model. Yeah. That's how to do it. Just dude with two axes. Just, that's great.
Nice 80s power stance. This week going on pre-order is like all of the warbands. Like, obviously, the two newest ones, Open and KO, which will round out our final season, or the rest of the Night Vault season.
Yeah.
Yep. So that's exciting. And all of the past sets are going to be released in plastics only, which was fantastic.
Yeah.
Yes. And I may actually be buying not one of these, but one of the other sets. Yeah,
so this is everything from the new season being released without their cards, right? So you can just get the packs of actual minis. So what's the one you're looking at? Talk for a moment while I blow my nose. He cleverly said, trying to start a segue.
I put an order this week for another Chosen Axes box, which is the Fire Slayer one. I'm going to do the... So in my quest to have like all of the Fire Slayers, I want to do a Rune Father on Magmadroth, but not have the dude like straddling the thing with the cross axe. I love the power pose of the and the awesome thing about the Magmadroths is that the builds have either like a platform or a saddle, and it's perfectly set up to have him stand on the platform, like in his power pose. And so I'm going to do that
That's
for
cool.
my Magfather. Yeah, do something a little different.
I dig that. Yeah, I mean, all of those, like, in general, the Night Vault models and all those, like, groups are pretty good. I think there's a couple that don't do it for me. I didn't really love the Tzeentch one. I didn't love the Dark Oath one. The Chaos ones this season let me down. I liked the other stuff. So, I think the KO is the winner. Yep, honestly, I think it's the coolest one.
And the Molag. Yeah, I'm still missing those two.
Sure. So. Yeah, I really think like the Kradron Overlords one was the winner as far as just coolest stuff. They just had the neatest takes on those models. They felt cool and dynamic and like they seem sweet. those dudes had guns. They were ready to do some work. I liked them. So
Agreed.
there you go. All right.
So those
cool.
are coming.
Yep.
Yep. It was asked, do we play Underworlds? Not in any real sense.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is like I have all of season 1. I have some of season 2. And yeah, I have them. Like they're like I've built decks for each of my things, and if I want to play, I can pull it out and but I don't like do competitive. I don't worry about like building the best decks and all that stuff.
Yeah, I paint the models if they're in an army that I play, because I like to have sort of as close to complete of the armies as I can. And then I play the game if I'm at a tournament and bored on a Friday night and somebody's like, "You want to play Underworlds?" And I'm like, "Sure." I'll remember how to play about halfway through the game. So that sounds fine. Just hand me a deck.
Yep.
That's usually my strategy. I take it very seriously.
Yeah, it's a nice light game. Like
sure.
it's one that I can play and not take seriously.
Yeah.
Yep.
If we're not doing like a pre-game the Friday night before, which often ends up being the case anyways. So
yeah,
there you go.
Both and. So the Blades of Khorne FAQ dropped.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it did. We're going to talk about obviously like FAQs and rules cadence and stuff like rules change cadence will be one of the controversies. I want to get the Prince song stuck in like everybody else's head because it's been stuck in my head all day. So hopefully that's all now stuck in your head. But the what just the only thing that like cooks my sausage on that one is that like we spent a fair amount of time in last week's show talking about the canon Wrathmongers thing, and now it's just like never mind, ignore all that. And I'm like, man, I don't like it when people invalidate my content 2 days after I make it. All content has a lifespan. Geez, that part evaporated quick.
Yeah,
that was the other thing that we talked about that changed though, so that's cool.
Yeah. Like what cooked my noodle was that like Ben Johnson had literally gotten up on the stream.
I've heard
and
this.
Like,
I don't care.
I know you don't. And we'll talk about this in the controversy.
Yeah.
But like it had just been like endorsed as legitimate in the stream, and then like next week it's like, oh, just kidding.
We'll talk it through during the controversy section. I know a lot of people have put their finger on that. That's we'll talk about it. Anyway, the Khorne FAQ was very funny because I did like a 20-minute topic of the week about FAQs. If you want to see all my thoughts about FAQs pre our discussion, go back and watch that because I got myself into a long cycle of thoughts on that. Not really, just like I really walked through my full and concise thoughts on it and ended up being like 23 minutes on what are normally like 5-minute videos. On the whole is fine. It's sort of like one of the things that came out of it, and this isn't really a controversial thing we'll touch on later, so I'll just kind of address it now, is you have these sort of weird rules interactions where like thing in book A gets answered by rules FAQ in FAQ B.
So you're talking about how the Khorne FAQ made the FAC better.
Well, whatever. Sure, it answered a question, right?
It did.
That was related to that. Now, of course, there's also a touch point to Khorne, so it wasn't like they just answered out of nowhere, and it had no grounding. Like it had a question in there that was related to that. But it just makes me think that like stuff like that should bubble up whenever that happens into sort of the generic core rule FAQ as well. Like
they shouldn't sit in the
if they're making like something that's going to have an outsized impact, if it reaches, so like some FAQs excuse me, some FAQ answers are very discreet. Right? Does unit X work like this? No, unit X works like this. Oh, okay, cool, right? And that's it. That could be the only thing that affects, right? Because it's that unique language and it's that specific use case and so on and so forth.
Yep.
Great, fine, okay. If I have that question, it'll be there. Whereas, like sometimes when they answer a question, it will have consequences that spill to other units, right? And it's always prompted. They don't just like crack the Khorne FAQ and start answering Ironjaw's questions, right? That's not what I'm implying here. I'm saying that like sometimes these things have a spider web effect, and so that like they need a better system to then go back. And by the way, I don't know that this would need to happen within the initial 2-week frame, but like it needs to happen fairly quickly afterward to bubble these things back up, right? To then trace to extrapolate the necessary things back up into the sort of core FAQ answer or whatever.
Like the primary principles that are...
Yeah, if you have just sort of a general rules implication that gets clarified. Because, I don't begrudge this, new books will explore new design space. We've talked about this cycle before, right? Yep. And new design space will beg new questions. New questions will have new answers. New answers can then reach all the way back to the rules which inspired them. And so, you know, like just that kind of stuff, there needs to be sort of a second layer to the FAQ. Like I'm fine, release the initial Khorne FAQ. I talked through in the topic of the week how like it's almost impossible for them within the time they've allotted themselves to get these things out and have them be of any value. 2 weeks is an unreasonably short time frame. Okay.
Right.
And why they often drift toward 3. I'm shocked they even do it that quick. Okay. So like, and I walk through the time frame of why I think that's incredible. And just like I would be honestly, I get it. They're trying to put this out fast enough because we demand it. But like there's a real tension here between having value and having it good and having it fast. Yeah.
Yep.
I wish there was a second layer here where they go back and say, okay, what we just answered needs to now be picked up and added to the core. So there you go. Just a thought. Anyway, not part of a controversy, just something that occurred to me as I was reading that and thought, wouldn't that be nice if we had that kind of a sort of, let's call it a regression cycle. Yeah.
Yeah. Who would have thought to check about the, like, if you get piled into question, like after, if you have all of these strikes first and you get piled into, who would have thought if you answer that question, like to look in the Khorne FAQ rather than the general FAQ?
Yeah, sure. Because it's not unreasonable that an FEC player could have the question of like, well, what if I miss my opportunity to fight at the start? When do I fight? Now, people who are like super dialed in to paying attention to everything are going to know the answer to that because they read every FAQ like we do and we talk about it on the show. So cool, there's an answer, right? The answer is, yeah, you can still fight later. Okay, great, cool. Fine, I don't have an issue with that. Like I take no umbrage with the way the rule was clarified at all.
No, not at all.
It's just like, there needs to be a second layer there because the FEC person might never find that if they come to that a month from now, right? Why would they randomly look in the Khorne FAQ?
Right.
So
that's what we're talking about when we talk about updating kind of the core.
Yeah. So, I mean, other than that, the Khorne FAQ was like, I don't know, it was fine. For the most part, it was just like, okay. A couple of funny things changed. Like one of the things we had talked about having a weird trigger timing that I actually liked, like, because it was at the start of the charge phase. So you didn't have to, we talked about sort of the pros and cons of that, because then you couldn't get out-gimped by like an FEC general or something, right? They moved it to the start of the combat phase. And I was like, now you can. Anytime I reach start of the combat phase, all I think in my head is like, well, if it's not my turn, I don't do that first, right? Because somebody else is going to come in and high tide me or bloodthirster, thing me or
they're going to win the activation wars as they've been dubbed.
Mm-hmm. The activation wars. I fought with your father in the activation wars. Yes.
Yes, it's like the when the leaks came out on the Fire Slayer stuff, which we won't be covering to this week, but the like there's one of the lodges like allow a Volkite unit or a Volkite or a Hearthcarpenter unit to trigger for a command point at the start of like combat phase.
Start of combat, yeah, sure.
Yeah, and so it's like dun dun dun, a new challenger has entered into the activation wars.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. No, that's great. All right. I mean, yeah, well, it's a thing that'll show up. Look, I'm here. Let me tell you why I'm happy for all this stuff. All this start of the combat thing. You know why they're like sprinkling this throughout like a nice spice? You know why Gristlegore has this, and some Bloodthirsters and a random Hearthguard unit can have it. You know why we're laying down these tasty treats?
Because if everybody has it, nobody has it.
No, because this opens the door to Slaanesh to just have always strikes first. Just as an army, they always fight at the start of combat, period. Just like, that's all. There you go. Just give me that. We're good. I need no other allegiance abilities. I can keep that summoning or lose it. Just that's what we do. We always fight first. 40k style.
That's so they permanent high tide?
Permanent high tide, yeah, all 5 rounds. Always. Obviously, off turn, we'd still get gibbed, right? Because the other person would still have the first activations.
If they have those abilities. Otherwise, you always fight first. Yeah, I don't know about that.
It's not real. I'm just making crap up, dude. I'm saying, where would you it opens the door, this sort of thing. That is their 40k rule. That's how they work.
Oh, I'm aware.
But obviously, I made that joke a long time ago that I would love to see that rule imported. But it was an insane thing. You couldn't do that because it would just totally break combat if it'd have all these people fighting first.
And then
maybe not.
The world we live in.
Yeah. Look, all I want is for Slaanesh to get it and elves to definitely not. That's all I need. The elves should not be
high elves.
Yeah,
exactly.
Whatever the light elves are. The angel
they roll up and they're like, "Oh, do you remember?"
Yeah, what'll happen, by the way, is Slaanesh won't get it, but those stupid elves will. That's what's going to actually happen. That's the cursed world I live in, right? That'll happen. And I'll be like, "Yep, just as I suspected." So whatever.
It's okay. They're angel elves, so you'll buy them.
If they're good angel sculpts, yeah. Especially if they got into a little of the weird style angels, like some classic and some odd, right?
Like the 6-winged seraphim.
Yeah. Or eyes on the wings and stuff, right? Because some of the angels were just
just crazy.
They're just masses of wings with eyes in them and stuff like that. Yeah, that kind of craziness. Doom just joined the chat. I dropped the word tasty just for him because I listened to his video earlier, which makes me laugh. He told me that word annoys him, so I was like, I literally wrote down a note of say that word during the show. Okay. What else we got in news?
Not a lot. We
also I wanted to talk about classes real quick. That was a thing. All right, so my Dallas class is in week and a half. Still a spot left. So that is in Dallas, Texas, here in the U.S. It's the Saturday and Sunday, April I have to look at this every time, 27th and 28th. Also, the UK classes are coming up quick. This is the 4th and 5th, and then the 6th and 7th. We're doing units on the 4th and 5th, and we're doing a large monster on the 6th and 7th. You should come paint with me. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're at Dark Sphere in London. This is in advance of Warhammer Fest. That one's going to be a really awesome time. The large monster class will be especially fun because I've decided to challenge myself. So I'm going over there, obviously, for lots of reasons, but to go to Warhammer Fest and also to be in Golden Demon. And I realized I don't have an Age of Sigmar large monster to enter in. So I was like, all right, I'll paint it during the class. So what I'm going to do during the class is make a Golden Demon entry. So if you come paint with me that Monday and Tuesday, you'll see how I make a Golden Demon entry. It's going to be a much shorter time frame than I would normally take for such a thing, but let's have some fun. Won't that be an interesting challenge? So there you go. All right, hilarious. So the link is down in the description for all of them.
The other news piece for this evening, it's probably full already, but it's worth mentioning. An hour and 25 minutes ago, the Holy Havoc sign up opened up.
That's right. Boom. Holy Havoc back in.
We'll be there with a wonderful teams extravaganza. This is the event last year that we took home the gold in, and we'll see all of you there who sign up.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so, somebody asked what monster I'm painting. A giant, literally a giant. One of those giants, a giant, like a Warhammer giant. At any rate, Holy Havoc is going to be awesome. Dude, I can't wait. Obviously, Team Warhammer Weekly's coming back. Tom may have scooted out on Holy Wars, but the team is back for Holy Havoc. Obviously, I'm bringing Slanesh. There's no question on that. That's been the plan for a long time. I can't wait to get that on the table. Tom's army is TBD. We'll see what he ends up doing. He's going through 7 different ideas. He'll have 4 more before he decides.
You're not wrong. I went through a lot, but I know what I'm taking ghosts.
I'm sure you will. No doubt. There's absolutely no chance that Tom will change his mind. Just mark that down, everybody. Like, we can just put it in the book right now. Just chisel it in stone.
I'm
okay.
taking ghosts.
Sure you are. All right.
Or I'm taking these Stormcast I'm painting right now. Who knows?
Yeah. So, at any rate, that's Holy Havoc's going to be awesome. I'll drop the link down in the description. What I'll say is you should absolutely sign up. It is so fun. The way that Steve runs it is amazing. We've talked about it lots of times on the show. It is just such a great time every single year. And even if it is full, I would highly recommend you sign up on the wait list, because it always happens that there's drops. It's just the nature of the thing. And it always happens that the first couple people on the wait list are able to get in. So if you can come join us, it's outside of Chicago, Illinois. It would be a great time. Link will be in the description. You should be there. It's going to be awesome. All right. So, any other news we have this week, Tom?
Not really.
All right. Then let's get to some pick of the week before we get into the controversy. So, what do you got, man? What's your pick of the week? What would you like to share with everybody?
Tyler Mangle, friend of the show, did a wonderful review on the Fireslayer book. So, if you want a nice tour through the new Fireslayer book that's forthcoming, I would encourage you to check out. I think we'll probably do a show next week on it, maybe.
Yeah. Next week should be the Fireslayer show. Yes, that's correct. Yep.
Check it out.
Awesome. For myself, I mentioned Doom's video earlier. It's a fun little discussion of many things, including his feelings on the Khorne FAQ and a discussion on gatekeeping. So if you're excited by controversy from this show, but you're like, I need more hot AoS takes, go over there. You can have more because he has more hot takes. You can just fill the next hours of your painting life with semi-pontification and hot takes. There you go. So, fun time. Oh, Tristan asked us about why we didn't cover the survey. Yeah, sure. Bonus pick of the week, which is also a sort of news item. Obviously, they're doing the big community survey. You should go fill it out. You should make your voice heard. You can win a Sisters of Battle army. If you win that and you're not a 40K player, you can just give it to me. And that's fine. No problems there. See, it's win-win. In other words, you win and I win. So it's win-win. But, you know.
And in the additional comments of the survey, I would encourage you all to promote the idea of Cetra and the construct, the Cetra, the true master of Shadespire, the genius behind the Shattered City, and his shade glass embedded construct army that he's going to lead out of the sands of the ruined city to take it to Nagash.
There's a bit of a Tomb Kings movement building in the survey. There is also somewhat of an anti-Tomb Kings movement. I'll leave that to I'll let the marketplace of ideas decide that one. So there you go. But yes, it's a weighty survey. They really get into the detail there. So I hope a lot of people fill it out and give them some good information.
It seems to be the same survey we took at Acon.
Same survey. What do you mean?
At Acon, they handed out a paper survey of like a multiple choice thing, and then like all the same questions of like, what do you feel about the turn priority and all that. Like everybody that did the championship, everybody that did the everybody that did the teams got surveyed, and I think it was just a print version of the survey.
It had to be a shortened version because this, if you say you play a lot of games, like this one gets long because they go into detail in every game you say you play. So, and
probably a shortened version. Yeah,
sure. I wanted to fill out the 40K part just so I could like vote for somebody playing power level because I just really like power level and I think it's an actual fun way to play the game. And I'm afraid that like us power level folks get our voices shouted out. So I was like, well, I'm gonna talk about me liking power level a lot. So there you go. So yeah,
you narrative gamer, you.
Sure. Or I just like simple things. Simple things. Simple things. All right. So yeah. So I'll link Doom's video and I'll link to the community survey down below. Cool. Hobby time. What are you working on, Tom? Stormcast still? You
working on my son's Stormcast. All of that.
They're very blue.
They are very blue. It's like all the blue. That's what he wanted. So I was like, okay, let's do this. We're doing all the blue. So yeah, it's been fun. It's basically a Hallowed Knights variant that got rid of all the pink, the Screamer pink, because I hate that color. It can die in the fire. And I replaced it with more blue.
Okay.
So
it's fine. Just all blue. Abba D, Abba die. Sure. I get it. How many points are you building for your son? Like, what's your end goal here?
It's 2,000.
Okay.
So he's been playing.
So he's gonna have a full army. All right.
Yeah, like he'll like it'll actually be closer to 2,500. Okay. Because he never can make up his mind whether he wants more evocators or more ballista, and so he swings hard one way or the other. Like, I want more evocators. Okay, cool. And he's like, no, I want more ballista this game. Okay, cool. And so, like, he'll be able to fully swap between the two.
Well, he seems to be clearly following right in your footsteps. So there you go.
Indeed, and obviously, like, he's sensitive to, like, you know, the good units.
Yeah,
I want more of that thing that kills everything. Yeah, sure. I want that one.
All right, fair enough. For myself, I'm working on perhaps something a bit unusual. In that I am working on these guys.
Yeah.
Which are Nurgle Death Guard people. Yeah. So
why are you painting Death Guard?
I am painting Death Guard to take to Golden Demon. So because I didn't have a 40K unit. And honestly, these are a really fun paint. Like, these are the only form of Nurgle I can stand because they're not like super gross. Like, these guys are pretty cool. They're still mostly locked in there.
Those are the 24-hour paint. Like those are the models that I did my 24-hour paint job for Kill Team when we went to Adepticon, which we never played. Like, and I painted like 5 of those guys maybe, and like 7 of the zombie guys. The
Poxwalker dudes?
Guys. Yeah. The Poxwalkers. Yeah, and I loved them. Like, it was a nice fun paint. I enjoyed those guys a lot.
Yeah, the Poxwalkers are too gross. That's exactly the Nurgle I can't do. Like, I can't do open exposed sores and diseases and things like that.
That's easy.
But, like, you know, this guy, he's fun. He has a little, like, tentacle coming out of his chest that has a little bell on the end. That's adorable. So yeah, that's fine. He's just
you are a fan of the tentacles.
Yeah, I mean, he just has like these guys are just still mostly locked in there. Like, you know, what's under there is super gross, but they've kept it. Yeah, they're keeping it under wraps, and I respect that. That's why I don't mind those guys. I also did this dude, which I shared over the weekend, which was his shoulder's not done yet. It's just, you know, base coat or whatever. But I did this guy. I did a class with Sergio Calvo this weekend, which was a lot of fun. And he was obviously Sergio is a fantastic painter, one of the best in the world. He's placed in the top 3 at at Crystal Brush 4 years running. That's quite an accomplishment. And he has a completely different style of painting, is what I will say. So it was really fun to spend a couple of days with him and learn some stuff and hang out with him and such. He's a really nice guy. And it was it's always fun to learn from different painters, especially painters who are way better than you, as he certainly is. And not better than you, Tom, although that's true, but he's way better than me. And
He's better than me.
Yeah, who also just has a very different way of thinking about things. So I thought it was cool. It was a really great class, and if he comes around your area and you get a chance, it's worth it. Worth it to spend a couple days there for sure. So yeah, that was it was a good time. But that's my hobby time. I'm finishing up this unit, and this is the last thing I have to finish up, these Death Guard, and then I'm ready to go. So obviously I have a bunch of stuff to finish prepping for classes, and I'll paint the thing, like as I mentioned earlier. I'm taking a giant, so I got to assemble him.
Are you going to have any space in your bag to bring me back all of the Forge World things?
Nope. Zero.
Is Kathy going to have any space in her bag?
I'm not going to. I answer in neither the affirmative nor the negative. If you need a thing in a clam pack, we can talk. Any more than that, it's probably off the table. There you go.
No, I wanted all the goblins.
You can fit one in a clam pack. You get one clam pack of goblins. That's what you get.
Oh. No colossal squig.
No colossal squig. No, you can ship that yourself. That's what I say.
It's so expensive when you buy it in dollars now.
Well, you can come over to Warhammer Fest at some point. You know, it's a lot of fun. Get yourself over there, man. You've never been there. So, you know, although it's not, I mean, it's not at Warhammer Fest, isn't at Warhammer World, right? It's up in Coventry. So, in a big arena. All right. So, Tom, with hobby time out of the way, shall we turn to some controversies?
I don't know. Controversy time is kind of my hobby time as well.
It is indeed. So what I want to talk about tonight is we're going to just move through a bunch of topics. I pre-scrawled some topics that I want to talk about. I'm sure that other thoughts will come up in the comments and we can move to those. You may have ideas other than what I wanted to talk about. But my goal here,
I do, but I'm gonna keep it tight.
Sure. Well, but like we should set some ground rules of this first. Okay, so we're going to talk about these things, and just so everybody's clear on this, right? I want this to be like, I want to establish 100% clarity right up front. Okay.
Okay.
We only care to talk about this because we love AoS as a game, and in general, the game is in an incredibly good place. And my personal feeling, and Tom, I don't know if you want to answer in the same way or not, but my personal sense of it is I have had more fun in the last couple years with AoS than I had in the previous 20 with any edition of Warhammer. Okay?
I think that's fair.
Okay. So the point is, all of this comes from a place of love. So any controversy we address is just like us talking about something because we love this thing. There's no haterade here. We're not firing up the haters brigade or anything like that. We're also not going to ever hate on specific people because specific people are just people trying to do a thing, and I generally assume good intentions. We're going to talk about things in the abstract of the idea of the thing, and we're going to try to do all this with nonsense. I would like to see, like in our discussion, we are going to endeavor to keep out unnecessary negativity. And I would ask everybody else to try to do the same, right? Like we can have a civil discussion on this. We're a good community. That's not a problem we have in AoS. So we can all do that. All right, cool. So
what do you want to hate on first, Vince?
I knew it. All right. Well, Tom, what do I want to discuss first? That's a great question. What I want to talk about first is let's just start with
Hey, stop before we get started.
Okay.
I'm gonna offer a disclaimer.
Go for it.
This show was not my idea.
No, it's mine.
This show and the clickbait title was completely Vince's idea.
This is my
not
idea.
Me.
Yep.
This is not me. This is not me stirring the pot. I am disowning all of what's about to happen. Okay,
Sure.
Vince, go.
Great. I don't know why we have to disown it. I think this will be a very positive conversation. All right. So let's talk about power creep, shall we? Let's start with something. Let's just start soft. Let's talk about hashtag power creep.
Power creep's not a thing, right?
I would agree. Yeah. So let's start there. Is power creep a thing? right now in the game. I'm not asking in general. I'm not asking in the history of it in previous editions. Right now, in AoS 2.0, however you want to count it, is power creep a thing?
Yes.
Hashtag power creep a thing.
Yes.
Okay. Why?
Because
the onus is going to be on the person who advances a position to defend it, Tom.
Indeed. Because what we're seeing, and by power creep, I'm defining that new things when compared to the power level of prior things.
Okay.
Like, so.
How are you? So examples help.
So let's take the last let's take the. It's not fair for me to talk about Fire Slayers yet because it's not out. It will be. It will be out, and we will talk about. Yeah, and we will talk about what it does to the meta. But I think that what we're seeing is like not in all of the books, but there's a very definite trend where we have a number of outliers over the last like the ironically as funny as this is, ironically the Gloomspite Gits is the outlier of these outliers. Like I think back to FEC, Skaven, and Beasts of Chaos.
I think we can go back to the beginning of next year safely. Sorry, last year.
Yeah,
right.
like
like clearly there was a design shift in general when we shifted into the not just in 2.0, when they knew that when they had solidified the plans for 2.0. So this is like Nurgle, Idoneth, Daughters, Legions, Gloomspite, Beasts of Chaos, FEC, Skaven, and Fire Slayers. I think I forgot one in there. But sure. There you go. Okay.
You get Night Hunt.
Oh, Stormcast and Night Hunt. There
Stormcast.
Yeah. Okay. So like that's a fair appraisal of the time period we're talking about, right? Further than that, things get weird. Like is the books now is the books now? That's not English. Are the books now, do they represent some kind of power creep over like the initial rules that came out, when the game launched or at the time of GHB 16? Well, yeah, but they're more like, I don't know that that's a fair comparison, right? So by limiting this to say the beginning of 2018, I think we can actually have a reasonable conversation about it. Thank you.
What I would say is this.
Khorne. How did I forget Khorne? Thank you very much, people in the comments.
I would definitely say that 2018 represents 2018 going into 2019. That trajectory, we have seen a continual escalation of like what units are capable of. Like it's almost like a spinning up of a generator that we haven't hit top speed yet. Like that's the best way I can describe it, because we are moving into like we are moving as we said. Like I'm gonna cite the Khorne review that we just did.
Okay, sure.
We look at a unit for 400 points that can drop 24 mortal wounds, like unblinkingly, right?
Yeah, sure.
And we're
you're talking about
Scarbrand, and we're like, yeah, I don't know, 400 points. It seems like a lot for 24 mortal wounds.
Sure.
You rewind the game 2 years ago.
Well, again, as I said, we're starting at Nurgle, but okay.
But even at Nurgle, let's rewind the game to Nurgle. I mean, like that was not something that was in the zeitgeist at the time. Like that was not in the purview of reality. But I would argue we began to see this like significant power escalation through like Daughters, IDK, and then moving forward.
Okay.
And now we have like I've said this before on Twitter. I'll briefly say it here. Like I think GW has successfully in the forthcoming Fire Slayer book has made both the most defensive tar pit unit while simultaneously also making the most offensive unit in Warhammer.
It's fine.
In a single thing now. Yeah, but like that's coming, folks. And like FEC can hit that with their Gristlegore General and mow on it all they want, and then it will explode when it activates.
Yeah, you're saying like, they can actually take the hit.
They can take the hit and then completely obliterate it and any of the other dragons it's engaged with.
Sure.
And so like this is the new world we're in, where there just seems to be a handful of outliers in every book that just seem to be surprising that they weren't caught before getting to print. That's what I would say.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure that that's like, even if I took that at face value.
Yeah.
The outlier argument, right? That is to say, like
Yep.
within every book, if you plotted, if you establish some kind of like power curve, whatever the heck that means, right?
Yep.
If we draw this imaginary line, and then you plotted every game element on it, right?
Yep.
That like every book has something that is like slightly too high on that line.
Okay. And what I would say is, I don't know that every book does have something that's slightly too high, but they might. Like when I look back to the recent books, I don't know what it would be for Khorne. But I do know probably priests, slaughter priests.
Okay.
Maybe.
Sure.
Maybe.
Yeah, you got to watch out for those 5-6 wound dudes
yes.
on a 5-up save.
I know. That's what I'm saying. Maybe. But I think about like the Gristlegore ridiculousness. I think about, or Archregent would be the one that like the power curve where like he is way undercosted for what he's doing.
Yeah, I mean, okay. So,
but I could walk through, like you go to Warp Seer, you could go to like when I think Boingrot Bounders are undercosted for what they do. Enlightened, like I can walk through and there's a number of things that just seem to be out of place.
Yeah, okay. Like here's what I'll say. Two thoughts on that. One, let's say because my argument is no, there is no power creep. If you set the date at that time. Okay. I don't see it. Now, let me at the same time caveat that in admission of certain realities. I think that when they got to the Nurgle book and we're looking at sort of how they wanted to reframe the game in light of what they were doing in 2.0, right?
Yep.
They sort of like that probably represented a skip step. All right. Yep. That is to say, there's probably some degree of marked change between what's before and what's after. I don't know if it's necessarily in power. Maybe maybe sometimes it isn't.
Yes.
But it's certainly in design ethos. You can feel the difference, right?
Yes.
In the way they were writing books between the beginning of 2018 and the stuff that came out in 2017, right?
Right. But that's still not the whole field of play. Like, so a lot of things are still operating on that old design philosophy.
I
and you feel that power curve difference in the tournament scene.
Maybe not. Again, like, okay. I mean, again, when I look at all the books, what I see is actually a shocking amount of probably like pretty evenness across the books. Yeah, there's always generally an undercosted thing. I don't disagree with that. Okay. And oftentimes it's like many of the things you put your finger on are maybe just like a points question, right? Are Enlightened too cheap? Probably, but that gets fixed regularly. It's not like that's not a fundamental problem with the book, right?
Right.
The standouts here in my mind, like when I look across, when you look at like if you unpack like LLV's numbers, right? You had this like Daughters going on a tear for a while.
Yep.
And there were sort of two different things that were fundamentally influencing that, right? One of which being the nature of Hagnar and its capability to stack powerful defense onto a highly offensive unit, combined with speed, right? And the just general meta being quite susceptible to that. Everybody was having melee punch-ups. All the books that were around it were melee punch-up books. The popular armies in the meta were melee punch-ups, right? The meta itself was a very like melee-focused meta at that time. And so the Daughters were just like in a great position to succeed. If they had dropped when there was like lots of powerful sniping around or something that was highly competitive, it's doubtful they would have been as powerful, right? Because they would have been losing like their hags and their Slaughter Queen like top one, right?
Right.
So, but anyway, the reality is that's what happened. We can have a discussion like, is Legions slightly above where it should be, probably. Like it had a very successful record on a lot of different army builds. Its fundamentals were very strong. So like, is it slightly above where it should be? Probably. IDK, I don't think is like is in any way representative of like an overpowered force. Our offense eels probably undercosted? Yeah, probably slightly. Okay. They're still not like, nothing has been affinity until recently. And I won't get into the Magic reference. Those who played Magic for a long time back in the day will be able to unpack what I just said. I do think this, I see it in exactly the opposite.
Okay.
There's a couple units in each book that are probably a little too efficient for the points. Okay, cool. That's just always going to happen because points are always part art, part science, and that's why we have regular points updates every year. Cool beans, right?
Right.
Those things will just get fixed. By the way, comments are scrolling. This is going to be an episode where it's hard for me to keep up with all the comments, but I will try, folks. The Skaven and FEC books represent true, like, having fundamental outliers as part of their books. And by the way, it's the FEC book being like, they have outliers in distinct ways, right? Like you mentioned the Warp Seer. Yeah, okay, the Warp Seer's fine. He's not the thing that actually wins games. Like, who gives a shit that the Warp Seer is
well, he's part of the rat trap. Like, he's a cheap part of the rat trap.
He's not your caster for that. He's terrible at that. The rat trap's hard.
No, but the Warp Seer inherently has
he uses
like one of the half movements. Yeah,
sure. He has Warp Gale. He has dreaded Warp Gale. I don't disagree. I'm just saying, like, he alone isn't doing it. And is he undercosted? Yeah, of course. We said that originally, right? Like, yep. But again, like, that guy's not the thing winning the game. The thing that's making Skaven good is they have a lot of different good fundamentals playing in every single phase in a probably too efficient way. Right? Like Rat Trap being a primary one. Like if there was a single outlier, if you had to put your book on a finger on a Gristlegore in that book, it's Rat Trap. That thing should just be unmade. Right? It's
the warp vortex. Yeah.
Yeah, it just doesn't need to be there. Right? If you got rid of that, is the book still probably on the Legion side of everything? Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
But could you fix most of the rest of the problem with points? Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yep.
Right? Gristlegore is different, or FEC, and the Gristlegore conundrum, right, is different in a way. I see these two as the outliers. When I look across the field at like Gloomspite, Beast of Chaos, Night Haunt, Stormcast, Blades of Khorne, if I didn't say that one already, IDK, Nurgle, right? When I look back at all these, I see things that are actually pretty close, right? Like, all those feel like they're within the same striking distance. Like in a world where that's kind of what's going on, they all feel pretty competitive with each other, right?
Sure, but you say that FEC and Skaven are outliers, but the reality is that,
and they're outliers because of very singular elements.
They've showed up 2 months ago and dominated the field.
I do not disagree with FEC's domination. Not in any way. But that doesn't make it... That one data point does not make a trend. Power creep is innately a claim of a trend. That every book represents a natural stair step over the last. Right? And I don't see how you could argue that. Can you argue that there are outliers in every book? Sure. Absolutely. And I wouldn't disagree with that. Can you argue that like Skaven and FEC have some items that were either not as well designed or mispointed? Absolutely. I can, like, that's fair. I would grant all those points. And I can grant all that, and that doesn't make power creep a thing because there's too many other data points that don't conform. You need a trend line. Like, that's the nature of trends. You don't count outliers. Right.
Well, what I'll say is this: like, if you're going to limit it to December or to January of last year, then yes, there is a fair degree of consistency for those 7 army books.
7, 8, I don't know, whatever's out there, sure.
But when you compare that to the 30-some factions,
sure,
those 7 are head and shoulders above everything else.
Again,
and so there's a resetting of the meta, of the power level of the meta. But the problem is, the consequence of that is that truly that it is the better, like the last year has seen a upgrade in power to everything that's had a book release compared to what that was before launch.
I don't disagree. As I said, my initial argument was I think there's a step there, right? Some of which is power, some of which is other just design elements. You, as I said, you can feel a difference in lots of ways. Now that doesn't mean that every that doesn't mean that every that point in time thing is crap. Okay.
Sure.
You know, like not arguably, Slaanesh has been doing quite well. And you could say, well, it got a bump in the GHP. Well, yeah, sure. Okay, cool. So like they have methods to redress other armies that haven't gotten army books. Right.
Right.
And they can work. Like Hosts has been doing quite well. It has no book ever. Believe me, I know. So like my fundamental argument, and by the way, I think that's also why they're trying to step up and like make this be the year of battle tomes, right? Because I think they're aware of the issue.
They're trying to catch everybody up. Sure.
And as long as they keep striking like, but by the way, what you're asking for, which is like we want more tomes faster.
Sure.
You know what you're going to get if you push for a bunch of tomes real fast?
You're going to get that. You're going to speed up the process of skew.
Yeah, you're gonna get inconsistencies because like these things take time to write and play test properly, and so like I too hope we get a lot of books this year. But if we're just like, no, we only want more stuff, well, then you're gonna get power inconsistencies, and So, but like overall, I'm shocked by how rich the meta is. That is to say, like the
I won't disagree with that.
FEC represents a problem. I do not disagree with that in any way, shape, or form. Okay, it does. Beginning and end of story. There are armies that it just like will flat out deck. Right? It is hinging on affinity. Okay, it's not there yet, but it's not far off. Okay, and the like so that's I am not arguing that this is suddenly not a problem. I think FEC is actually a significant problem for a couple reasons, as we talked about in our FEC show. But the FEC book having these problems doesn't equal #power creep. It doesn't draw the trend line by itself. And what I would hope for is that what you see in the books are twofold things. One, that they end up more like Gloomspite and Beasts and Blades, which I think are three excellent books. Okay. I think Beast, by the way, is just like I think Beast of Chaos is an extremely well written book that's just like some slight point adjustments away from being like that's it, right? And when we're good to go. Same with Night Haunt, by the way. I would argue it's Night Haunt's in the same ballpark. I would argue that like the Khorne book really nailed it. It's one of the best books I've read in a long time. I think Khorne was fantastic. So like they're hitting this stuff. It's just we have these outliers. And we got to deal with that. And that's fine. We will. Like, that stuff will get dealt with. How do I have two Tom Lyons?
I know. Hold on.
This is fun times. All right. And yes, as I said, I think it's a design element. Okay. All right. I got while Tom is doing whatever he's doing, which I have no idea. Nope, you're still on mute, Tom. And you need to turn off both the sound and mute yourself on one of the things.
So this
you didn't mute the sound coming out of the other one. Understand how internet works. Why do you have a phone in your lap? What are you doing with your life?
The problem is that my
stop. Still didn't fix it. You want to fix this, Tom? Oh my God. All right. So anyway, I'll keep going while he's there. While he's fixing whatever he's doing. Yeah, like ultimately, I mean, I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty of this, but that's my stance. It's two different arguments on it. You can take it how you want. Continue to discuss. But I think that a lot of this stuff will get cleared out once it moves to the system. Once we get like GHB 19. Is this you trying to fix your laptop problem? Is the thing you're too hot?
No, the Amber's laptop has decided to cease charging completely, and I'm at 5% on it. So
Gotcha.
we're on my phone now. This is
Okay.
the world we live in.
That is literally the worst angle to shoot at, by the way. So there you go. Hey, see, that's much better. This is the kind of quality programming, by the way, folks, we bring you every week. This is the best. Yeah, this is us performing at a great level here. All right. So, are we ready to move on to the next controversy, Tom?
Sure.
Okay, you're very quiet, by the way.
I'm sorry. I can talk louder.
It's fine. It's fine. Talk in a normal human voice, and you'll be fine. Okay. So now your phone is like so close to your face. I cannot handle you, Tom. I can't handle you. All right? You're ridiculous. You are a ridiculous human being. I want that to be known.
The definition of ridiculous, and it, that's what makes me lovable.
All right. Yeah, sure it is. Okay. So just to answer a comment real quick.
I don't have a bag of chips nearby.
Sure. Someone had said they don't think they've ever heard me say something is broken. Without saying it's points related. Well, one, I just literally said I think something's fundamentally broken. Like 5 seconds ago. Maybe you weren't there yet. But two, I have a pretty wide tolerance. I think most of the time the game can handle a pretty wide variance of things. So like I don't run to like this thing is broken. I have said things are bent many times, but there's a difference between bent and broken, right? But anyway, if I'm not, I'll tell you if I think something's broken, and FEC has broken elements in it. There you go. The rat trap is straight broken. Those are two things I just said. So there you go. Okay. So that being said, let's move on to something else completely. Let's move on to another low controversy item, Tom, shall we?
Sure.
All right. Let's talk about shooting. Okay?
Okay.
I want to talk about shooting. Is shooting a good thing or a bad thing?
I mean,
I can't think of a single thing. By the way, you're looking at me like I grew a second head. You're out of your mind. This is like literally the most controversial thing we could ever talk about. I can't think of a thing that's caused more whinging on the internet than shooting. Forget gristle gore. That's a joke compared to shooting. Okay? And the 25 years of people complaining about shooting I've had to put up with in this game.
It's just so ridiculous because like I forgot that this is a game that has shooting in the last year.
That's fair.
I mean, like this game has shooting? Like that's a thing?
So like is shooting good or bad? That's my question. Do we need more of it? And how careful of a line do you have to walk before it becomes bad?
I mean, I like shooting.
I'm sure you do. You ran, you had a whole KO army and you powered through that for a while, right? Is there not enough shooting right now? Is it okay to have armies that completely rely on shooting?
No.
All right. Why not?
Because
we don't just have opinions. We defend them and discuss them with nuance here, Tom.
So essentially, you're going to make me work for this.
This is literally what you do professionally. This should not be challenging.
I know, but I don't want to do this in my off time. Okay. No. Okay. So here's the deal. Shooting inherently is a one-sided activity. And what I mean by that is like it's the type of activity where I get to play with my toys, you don't get to play with your toys. So you can go ahead and take your toys off. And so it is a very non-interactive type of experience where basically one person gets to harass, molest, deal with the enemy in a way that is without having any type of reprisal or rebuttal. Like, we would live in a different world if the shooting phase was like the shooting phase in Kill Team.
If it went back and forth?
Yeah, imagine a world where, like, in every shooting phase, you've selected a unit and had like an alternating activation of shooting units between the two armies. Like, this would be a different world we live in.
Sure, but we don't.
But we don't. You're right. You're right. And so I don't know. I think that anytime you develop a mechanic that is lopsided for play, and it removes the interactivity, it is going to generate a negative experience. Whether it is alpha striking, whether it is shooting, because basically all shooting is alpha striking at range. Like that's all shooting really is.
Yeah, I mean, shooting seems to have like. Let me jump in here. Shooting's interesting to me, right? It's just as a thing.
Yeah.
Because in general, we don't seem to have the same problem with magic at range. I mean, there's some whinging about magic's effectiveness, but like the reality
when you're facing down a Tzeentch army.
Again, people's complaint with Change Host wasn't usually like the abundance of spells cast. It was the clogging up of the board and the horror nonsense, right?
Right.
I'm not disputing that their magic phase was strong, right? But there's a sense of interactivity there because I get to at least roll dice to try to stop you.
Right.
Right. Okay. In combat, I have some kind of action I'm often taking because I don't know, I'm making a saving throw where I get to strike back when I'm done. Right. Mm-hmm. If anybody's still standing. Right. But like fundamentally, yes, the difference is it's power projection with less risk and commitment, right?
Right.
And it trips some kind of instinctual fairness response in us, like because of that. Something about that like lower risk tolerance just seems to like psychologically trigger people, right?
Like, hey, you can't do that
because you can plow into people with like a unit that just blows their unit up, and I can and you can say like, well, I can chaff that, right? I can put somebody in the way of that. Or if I can build an anvil that can survive it and punch back. But like if I have something tough enough to survive your shooting, then I survived your shooting and that's it. Right? That's all that happens. My interactivity stops.
Right.
So it sort of triggers this innate like that's not fair play, right? Response. Because the power is getting projected at you from a distance. And you're like, yeah, your interaction becomes very low, right? Whereas combat, not even because even if you alpha strike somebody and blow their unit up, your unit then is often still in a vulnerable place, right? You have to commit to some great degree to that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Totally.
Whereas that's not the case with oftentimes with shooting, right? Where we've seen shooting bubble up and become like, oh, by the way, like, so Dan in the comments mentioned, like, why aren't we seeing 90 handgunners hitting and wounding on 2s with Neg 1 Ren winning everything? Because that's a junk army. And because the range is 16 inches, right? Where we've seen
and no mobility.
Right.
It's very significant that they can't actually like get where they need to be. And so what ends up happening is that like KO armies end up outranging them.
Well, what I would argue is that where we've seen shooting bubble up and become a problem, and perhaps this is instructive of like the way shooting should be thought of.
Yeah.
Is that when shooting becomes long enough range that people can't respond with melee in a reasonable way, right? And becomes accurate and destructive enough to like easily snipe out choice targets, so they can not only project power, but they can do it from a vast distance, and they can pretty reliably remove the pieces they need to remove.
Anvil guard with long strikes, like some people have ran that to great effectiveness in Akon, where they like pick up, remove a bunch of pieces, and then just teleport across the table, reset up somewhere else, remove a bunch of pieces, and they can basically do that.
Yeah, so like, Skyfires are another great example, right? When they were both cheap and quite destructive, that's a bad combination, right? So like, and exceedingly mobile, right? Like insanely mobile. Yep. So they were sort of like this like combination of all the factors that make shooting dangerous. If KO had never had a range longer than 12 inches, Let's just imagine a world where that was their longest gun.
Sure.
It wasn't like on a boat. Okay.
Sure. Yep.
I'm not sure that people would have had such a visceral reaction to them, because if you've got to move within a foot of somebody, even slow people are likely going to be able to charge you in response to the next round.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And you also can't reach as deep into their lines. It becomes a lot harder to pick out characters, right? All this stuff becomes true, right? That's a fair point. Dan also mentioned that like Skyfires were also viable in combat. Super fair, like, you know. But like Skyfires often could go a game and not get in combat and still be incredibly tide turning. They were this horrible combination of like ultra efficient for their points, highly mobile, and incredibly destructive at a very long range, right? So anytime we see those things start coming together, we start like that's where shooting becomes a problem. I would argue if shooting is kept either sequestered and controlled within an army, where it's forced to be a sort of mixed force, right? Where like you just don't have a viable all shooting army, right? Or powerful. All shooting's the wrong word. We're not really talking about an all shooting army here, because that's going to auto lose, right? If everybody in your army sucks in melee, you have to go out and take points in this game. So like what we're talking about is actually hitting a critical mass of valuable shooting. Yep. Okay.
It's like, so the reason why my mixed dwarf army was so good is that I could, I had lots of long range shooting that was very valuable and very punchy. And I also happened to have quite a bit of short range shooting as well.
Right.
And so I could do all of the things.
Yeah. So like perhaps the instructive lesson here is like, don't allow a critical mass of mobile, long range, deadly shooting, right? Like that, when you put it like that, it seems like, well, okay, it doesn't seem that controversial, I suppose, right? But we have seen that happen. And there was this sort of like, there has been this strong overcorrection over the past year and a half, where your joke of like, is there still shooting in this game? You know?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, but like the only thing we've really seen bring it back strong was one, well, Bristlegore has prompted a shooting response, because it's a piece that needs to be responded to with shooting often by a lot of armies, right?
Right.
Skaven have also done a lot to bring it back, because they have like a pretty decent mass of deadly long range, although not always mobile, sometimes mobile, but not always mobile shooting. Some of their shooting is quite static, some of it's quite mobile. So there you go. And where we see it become a problem is when it's able to hit that critical mass on those items. So in my mind, like the right answer is shooting can and should be part of the game. And you should feel like we need to kind of, at one side, we need to kind of check ourselves. Like when a piece of our army gets shot off, our immediate response shouldn't be like shooting is BS, which I've seen happen sometimes, right?
Right.
Like
Sure.
sometimes somebody will be able to pick off one of your valuable pieces and you're like, man, this is crap. Okay, well, probably not that. That seems like a bit strong. Anything that can shoot off somebody, like that shouldn't be the bar, right? It should be like when the army can apply that repeatedly, consistently at mobility in ways you have no reprisal against. That's when it becomes problematic, and when we should go throw up the red flag and be like, yeah, this isn't how we want to see this game played, because fundamentally this is a combat game. So it's okay to have shooting armies, but I need to be able to respond to that shooting army with melee, which means either things that long range need to be very slow, or things that are fast need to be very short range, right? One of those two sort of things need to remain kind of fundamentally true, right?
Right.
Is that fair?
Yeah, I think so.
There you go. We solved shooting.
It makes me want to play an all-shooting Endrin Rigorless.
Shooting Endrin Rigorless. No saws? Sawless?
Well, they natively get saws. So in like a 12-man pack, you're gonna get 4 saws, 5 attacks anyways.
Gotcha. But focusing on the guns.
Yeah, so run like 3 units of 12. And then some battle line. And then some chemists.
I await your new KO overlords. By the way, when you tilt your head back, the shot is even better. It's great. I do like seeing your brain. So, all right, shooting handled. Well, I'm sure that won't be controversial at all. Okay, so next up, I want to talk about a fun one. This is one that you and I have had for a while. Okay. It's actually kind of two topics rolled into one. And this is something that's like going to be very specific. So we'll need to set it up.
Okay.
So I want to talk about books and like sort of number of books and supplements and the book releases.
Like the flood, the bookshelf.
Yeah. Now we're still not we're not 40K. So like we should all count our
No.
blessings on that. But I want to talk about book release, and I want to talk about it against the framing device of second edition Dungeons and Dragons.
Yep.
Do you have your complete Shi'ar handbook in range?
I don't. Like, it's behind a wall of boxes, but it's
Sure.
there. Like, it's 15 feet away.
Yes. Often this could be called bloat. That might be somebody had mentioned that in the comments, and that's a fair word for this. Okay. So
I have now lost the laptop, so I have no ability to look at comments.
that's fine. I'm watching the comments. You're so ridiculous with your. I don't even know what to say to you. Okay, so I'll tone myself down to if you're talking louder, I'll tone myself down. So we have a lot of books right now. The general discussion is like, is it a problem that we often have 3 books when we're playing? Right, some kind of version of the rules, the core rules of some kind, the General's Handbook, and Malign Sorcery, and probably our own army book. So let's just round up to 4, shall we?
Sure.
Okay. Is that too many? Should, like, obviously our army book's always going to be our army book. I don't think people would say like that is too many. But like we have this forbidden power thing happening. We have other supplements that'll come. Do we risk? So let's start at the beginning. Is that number of books a problem?
Probably not. I mean, I think the problem is when you have a diffusion of information in a lot of different locations. And so, like, to me, the egregious aspect of this, for example, is the realm rules located in, like, 2 different spots with, like, 1 spell on 1 page and 6 spells on another page and traits on 1. And, like, that, to me, is the egregious, frustrating part of this. Because, like, for most of my army book stuff, like, I have all that memorized. So I don't need to worry about my own army rules. Like,
well, and also, I think we would always expect that our own army is separate in some way, and that's fair.
Right. And like, so the scenario rules, but oftentimes, like, the rules are in the packs, so you don't need the core, like, you don't need GHB for that. So I don't know. I mean, to me, the standout here is realm rules.
The realm rules being split across.
Yeah.
Like artifacts and the spells. Yeah, I agree. I think that's right. I think that like as we go into the next, like whenever they do with forbidden power, that sparks a fear in me that suddenly like realm or endless spells or whatever could suddenly be split. Like suddenly this stuff is now split across 3 books.
3 books, yeah. So let me get something real quick. I want to show you something.
Sure. Well,
so
go ahead.
So one solution to this for me, somebody had one of our viewers and one of my friends that had shared this with me. They combined like on one document all of the like realm rules.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and they made spell cards for all of the realm spells. And so I could have this like little thing that has my war scroll cards in it. And then in the back, I was able to like put all the realm rules from the core book, and then I have the spell cards. You know, so like I've been able to mitigate that through aids. But the key is that GW has not produced those aids themselves, and so not everybody, and actually, in fact, most people do not have that readily available.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the egregious part of this is that like because not everyone has it readily available, it's easy to forget about some of these things in gameplay. Like what spells are available and stuff like that.
Sure. And this really does feel like just a game aid problem, right?
Right.
Doesn't it feel like that?
Yeah, like if they had a set of like, so imagine that they had a war scroll pack that you could buy. Sure. That in that war scroll pack is a double-sided, like I showed you, like Mine are single-sided. But imagine is if this, like, Akshi Realm of Fire on this side had all the realm rules, and imagine on this side had the 6 spells for Akshi. Like, what? You have like 7 of those cards, and you're done.
Sure.
Right? Like,
well, if you want to go all in, then you could also have like there's your realm rules. You could also have like the realm artifacts.
Yep.
You could have the realm artifacts in the card pack. No reason you couldn't, right?
Sure. Yeah.
If we're gonna make a little stack of these cards, let's make them useful, right? And like, it does feel like there could be other ways they extract and combine this stuff, because the point being, I don't need all of malign sorcery, right? The egregious part here isn't I need to bring all these books with me and reference everything in them. Oftentimes, I need to reference very, very little in them. And that's the challenge, right? Is the book for a page. So this does feel like a game-made solvable problem. Like, they could publish something that's just a smart layout recombination of a lot of these factors into one thing. And the reality is, I'd pay for it. If it was well designed, looked nice, good card stock, I'd pay for it.
$10, $15, like, just like they did the War Scroll cards. Like, I think they have a product. And I mean, like, at the community meeting at ACON this year, like, we gave that feedback to GW. So I mean, it's something that like they have in hand. They like, and what I mean by that is like they know the concern of the community, and so I'm hoping that there's movement. Like there's movement there, because the reality is that it's a very simple solution to a very frustrating problem.
Yeah, I agree. This one feels like it should be the least controversial because it's the most readily solvable, right? Yeah. So I it's fine. This would be, by the way, this is a great thing to put in the survey. Somebody just mentioned it. I agree. This is a great thing to put in the survey. Like when people ask you, because they have a question sort of specific to like game aids and what could improve your experience with the game in there. This seems like exactly the kind of thing, right?
Yeah. Low hanging fruit is what we call this.
Yeah. And it also, like, I bought all those books and now I'll buy another thing that contains the same rules again. And I would do so happily. Now I would ask, in good faith, by the by, that when you do this stuff in the future, you think about this challenge, right? And try to decide, try to sort of lay out these things a little better. I'm sympathetic because I know laying these things out is often very challenging. And when you've got different products, different teams, sometimes the necessity is just the necessity. Things have to be broken up in ways that aren't always the best. I get it.
Yeah.
But we can course correct now, right? Like you can fix that later on through these additional supplements. So there you go.
Indeed.
Okay. So let's then move to bloat. All right. So the specific idea. So they make some additional products. We have this forbidden power thing. We have whatever Warcry is, right? And whatever else they make. Are we in a world where we just have too many niche products that happen to AoS? Could AoS get niche productified?
I mean, I don't think so.
Okay. The reference here, by the way, to second edition D&D, and like if you played D&D back during the second edition time period, in the late 80s and early 90s, or going into the mid 90s, TSR up till its end famously just kept printing books. And like you can say, well, I have a stack of third edition books. Like that's great. Nothing compares to second edition.
Yeah, you don't understand.
Like second edition, literally, they had this thing called the Complete Shi'ar Handbook. I can't even explain how stupid that is. That book exists. That is the most unbelievably insane thing that they ran thousands of copies of that book. But the other reason I point this out is because famously they had no market intel, and when Wizards of the Coast took over TSR and went to their warehouse and went inside and looked around, their warehouse was just pallets of old books that had never sold, that they had just run hundreds, thousands and thousands of these books that had no audience, that were so niche. So we're a long way from that, right? But I do wonder of like, what's the right number here, right? What do we want? They can't release army books and new armies forever, right?
I mean, really?
Yeah, not in the quantity we want, right? Because eventually you're going to hit all the army books or whatever. You could put out a couple new armies, but we clearly have an appetite for more stuff. Yeah.
Sure.
We have an appetite for it, and certainly they want to sell it, right? So what do they make? By the way, I would point out that like Wizards of the Coast, when they're in current world, like in 5th edition, has answered this by just saying no and not making more books, right? Like they have published a shockingly low number of books for this edition for as many years as we are in. And most of those books, by the way, are just like adventures, things that if you're not running the adventure, you can ignore. They've put out like 2 books with player information in X years of the game. That is insane. Right? That was their answer to avoid bloat. Just like, nah, we're not doing that. We're going to publish this other thing instead. And so we're going to publish very few of even those. Okay. So what do they sell? Because they want to keep making products. So what's the answer here? How do we not get Forbidden Power and Hidden Charms and another secret 2.7? You get what I'm meaning here, right?
Yeah.
Or like
the
out of 1,000 box games.
More
like,
models.
What's that?
More models.
But more models have a naturally limited audience, right? You can only make so many new armies, and people can only collect those so fast. Like that has a naturally limited audience. Your whole player base, you publish something for theoretically the whole player base. That's great. Everybody can buy it. You make Kharadron Overlords. Nobody's ever going to be on board for Kharadron Overlords or IDK or whatever. Those completely new armies are always a risk, always, because they're not a tested concept, right? So, like, what do you sell?
Models of old stuff.
Like redoing old models. That's very funny. That's what somebody literally just said in the comments.
That's funny. Heraldor Sculpt 7.
More Stormcast.
More Stormcast. I mean, I think the answer is, I mean, traditionally GW have solved this problem by launching a new edition and re-releasing everything. Like we've just went through an entire life cycle of this in AoS.
Mm-hmm.
With AoS first edition.
Yeah, but we have a tolerance for that, right?
Right, and so
there's only so many times you can do this within the span of an advanced cycle, like we're doing now. We're all happy about this, and like eventually, I'm going to want another book. Like there will be another Khorne book. This wasn't the last Khorne book that'll ever be published, right?
I mean, we're on 3 and 5 years.
Sure, but like you can. That's an outstanding example, right? But like, there's got to be other stuff. So what are the other things? I think some of the people in our comments have had good answers. I want to kind of harvest some of them because I think that like I think that there is the reason I bring this up, by the way. Let me actually, before I say the good ideas in the comments, is because I'm very sensitive to this. If you go back and look at like my sort of history of Warhammer editions video I did in like the tabletop history, what happens is like there's 3 times this cycle has repeated in the history of Warhammer, not counting the current cycle we're in, which is like you build up and you publish a bunch of stuff and you publish a bunch of stuff and you bloat and you bloat and you bloat and then you shut it all down and restart. Right. And so like this was the changeover to 4th, the changeover to 6th, and then the changeover to AoS. Right?
Yep.
Where things just got too big, too weighty, too much nonsense, too much junk, too much bloat, too much backstory. Not like narratively, just I mean like backstory in the sort of like what I have to take in my head to understand the state of play in the game, not narratively. To know, so we got to just like shut this down and re-kick it, right? AoS 2 didn't do that. It felt very much like just a very natural extension of AoS. The world didn't change in these unbelievable degrees, although maybe it didn't. I like somebody said I like my worlds to be spheres, not flat circles. Time is a flat circle. Yes, indeed. So my argument would be so like we want to try to avoid that, right? We don't want to get to shutdown point, right? So even if it's not a problem now, we want to look 3 to 5 years in the future and say, how do we not go down that road?
But have they ever figured that out?
I don't know. Like my point is, it feels like Wizards has cracked the code. So how do we do the same thing? And some people have said, like in the comments, things I've liked are things like campaign expansions. That feels like a good one. I like that one, right? To drive more like both stuff that's interesting in match play and in narrative play. Campaign expansions are cool.
Like Firestorm-esque things?
Sure, why not? Yeah.
Like new ways to use old models and old armies?
Absolutely, yes. Like new ways to do that stuff. That you got to be careful with that, because too much of it becomes bloat real fast, right? Especially if it all ends up in a match play valid world, right?
Right.
So,
Yep.
but that is a good thing in moderation. Terrain, that's a solid one, right? That's a great thing to make, and like that's just pretty stock standard, right? What's that?
Paint.
Paint, sure, yeah. Well, making airbrushes clearly. But my argument would ultimately be like this does represent some kind of fundamental challenge, right, of what they do, and they have to consider their product mix like very carefully, because if we as the customers get a chance to decide, we would literally bury ourselves and kill our own game, right?
Sure.
It's the goose that laid the golden egg, right?
Yep.
We will squeeze that goose. If it was up to us, we would squeeze that goose till every egg came out of that cloaca, and there was just nothing left, and that goose was dead. And that's what we'll do, because we're not going to sit back and be like, no, it's okay, we don't need any more products right now, right? There's always a part of the market that's going to be like vociferously advocating for additional attention through product releases. But there's a limit to that before you get to bloat, right?
Sure.
Okay.
I don't disagree with that.
So there you go. Tough line to walk. My ultimate answer on that would be for them to right now, I hope they're doing this, because they plan 3 years in advance, or whatever, right?
Yeah,
so,
like make a commitment.
Yeah, so I hope they're very carefully thinking about their product mix that they have planned over the next 3 years, and think about things like doing small expansions of existing armies where they could, like little bits and pieces here and there. Again, like an expansion to an army is even riskier. That's the slimmest of market segments, but it's tested at the same time, because you have people who will buy it.
Maybe not though, because like, man, I can tell you, if you release next year in 1 year, if you release a new Fire Slayer book with a new double kit or 2 new double kits,
you don't want a new book. I'm talking about like just like so you could put out additional.
But you're misunderstanding what I'm saying though.
Okay.
A double kit, or like 2 or 3 more kits with a new book and new battalions, and I'm in again for another book, as all the Khorne players have been for the last 3 years.
Sure.
Right? Like, and so like they can milk like for only a few small kits, they can actually milk the army book train quite a while through battalions and other things like that as well.
That becomes unsatisfying quickly. Like you have invalidating people's old stuff. Yeah, you give them new kits.
You're giving them new ways to use old stuff through battalions.
I understand that. That will test people's patience real fast, right?
Maybe.
So like having introducing new kits through things like Warcry or Underworlds can be another interesting way to go, right? Where you can supplement an army without needing to re-release a book or something, right?
Sorry, I'm bitter because
no kidding.
I'm coming fresh off of the reality that there are no new Fire Slayer battalions. There are 3 usable battalions, like playable battalions in the entire book. That's it. There's just 3 battalions, and they're the 3 that we've always had, just slightly tweaked to the new rules. And so like, man, as a Fire Slayer player, what I wouldn't give for like a handful of new battalions. And that can show up in any other type of supplement. But like at the same time, I would want to consolidate like my Fire Slayer stuff into a single supplement. So a new army book becomes an easy, low-hanging fruit for something like that.
I understand that. You probably have more of a willingness on that than many people. Is my general sense of it. If you keep
Maybe.
trickling stuff for people, especially without new kits, you're going to get angry people real fast.
And this is what I was saying, is that they can throw out a token double kit. You know, like 2 of those. That's 4 new units.
Sure.
Yeah. Anyways.
It'll be interesting to watch. This is one I don't have a solid answer to because I don't know where the line is. Right?
Sure.
I'm not sure what their answer is, but there you go. Hey, this is a fun one for discussion. What would you like to see? What do you think that product mix looks like, right? This is a real challenge. I mean, I think it's obviously we can go too far, and I think it's obvious you can have not enough, right? Like the 2 ends of the spectrum are so bright here, right? Like we can all imagine being buried, and we can all imagine the dry desert because we lived in the dry desert in previous editions, right?
Yeah. I wonder if like part of it is not diversifying product line and creating like inner dependence, and they've done some of this, like how they've created the Kill Team 40K interwoven character, or how they've created or how they are creating the Warhammer or the AoS / Warcry, where like you can use like the different market products are going to incentivize people to jump between the 2 of them. And then you get something like Warcry, where like starting a new warband is easy. Then that warband can very quickly bleed into an actual army.
Mm-hmm.
And so people growing larger collections through synergy.
Sure.
Like product synergy.
That was actually, I want to point out Michael's comment, which was they could add new battalions in the yearly GHB. That's actually, I like that idea quite a bit. What exactly the GHB contains is probably something that I think could use some thought, and that could be an interesting way to go.
Oh man, I would love that.
Yeah, sure. Just like supplement even book armies with GHB stuff. There's no reason you don't, right? I like that idea a lot. I support that one. I think that sounds fun. Okay. So I agree with everything Corden just said in the comments, by the way. All right. Well, okay. Let's talk about a fun one here for a moment. Okay. Well, this one's just more of like a grinds my gears one. Really, like, so here we go. You know what really grinds my gears?
What's that?
Why is the Path to Glory thing where it's placed in the in the books? Is this on anyone else's radar? Am I the only human being on the planet that feels this way? Why is it where it is?
Because it's where it gets the most visibility, which is right in between allegiance abilities and all the rest of the information you want to do.
I do not understand its placement at all. If I could like wave a wand and change one thing about the nature of book design, I would swap the Path to Glory and the allegiance stuff. Like that should clearly be first.
I mean,
the Path to Glory stuff should start, and then we move into the general army stuff. Because Path to Glory is a completely different method of play. Like, I do not understand this layout.
To their credit, they're clearly, obviously, very sold on our old Mordheim skirmish system.
Look,
and they really want to market. You know, like they're still in on it.
This is not a repudiation of Path to Glory. Okay, I think Path to Glory is super cool. I think it's great. I love lots of people use Path to Glory to do leagues at their store, to do slow growth stuff, to help people get in the game. Fantastic, man. Path to Glory is awesome that it exists for that. I love it. Wonderful. Okay. Like, by the way, when I say first thing, Steve had said narrative first. I mean in the rules section, Steve, right? Like the general layout of these books is like narrative, art, rules, right? That's the way this goes. Yeah. So like story stuff is first. They give you the background of the army. You talk about the units, stuff like that. Cool. Dig it. Art, which I love. I love the sections of like cool art and paintings and the painting guides. I dig all that. Wonderful. All that stuff works. Does exactly what it should. Aces. And then I flip into like rules, third part of the book, right? And what do I get? I get start with like my allegiance stuff, and then usually like some artifacts and command traits and prayers, and then all of a sudden Path to Glory just like rears up its ugly head, and then I'm like, wait, what? Then I gotta like flip 10 pages to try to go to the comments.
What's that artifact? I must have missed this one. Oh, it's Path to Glory.
Yeah,
they tricked me again.
Every time. Why is it where it is?
Yeah, no, legit.
And again, none of this is me saying I don't like Path to Glory. To be 100% clear, I like Path to Glory. It's just in a stupid place. My complaint here is literally layout based. It's 100% layout based. That's it.
Way to be nitpicky, Vince.
And it's nitpicky, but it's driven me insane for like a year and a half. I don't get it.
You're such a negative Nancy.
This is the one. So like, and by the way, if that's what they want you to play first, Steve, then put it first. Don't put it in the middle. In the middle is where it makes the least sense. So anyway, there we go. Okay. General rant about that one over. That was my only really ranty one, but I really had a gear grind on this one. Okay.
Okay.
I want Path to Glory in the books. I want it to open the rules section and describe what it is, and then I want all the general army stuff because they're two different modes of play and they should be grouped together logically. It seems simple. I don't know why this is even a thing. Why is this still a thing? Okay.
Imagine like Warcry having its own section as well.
Sure.
And you're just like,
what if you just flip 2 pages and then skirmishers in the middle? Yeah, like what? No, get this out of here. This isn't where this belongs. Like if you just in the middle of your war scrolls and now some skirmish stuff. That's what it feels like. All right.
Yep.
Okay. Cool. All right. So let's talk about. Let's get into it. Here we go, Tom. This is the one. We saved it. We saved it for late on, but now it's time to do the big one. Here we go. Let's talk about priority. Okay.
Okay.
It's not really a big one. It is what it is. Let's talk about priority. Priorities come up a lot in the conversation because obviously it's actually specifically asked about in the community survey, right? And so there's become, this is sort of refresh the discussion on this.
Yep.
So what's your general, is priority? I'm going to ask you a trick question, Tom. Okay. Is priority good or bad?
It's good. And if you don't like it, you're a bad player.
Oh, wow. Jeez. Okay. Going for the hard line, huh? Taking that hard line stance. You want to defend that at all?
Nope. You just don't.
You have to defend the things you say on this show, Tom.
I know you do. Okay. I think that ultimately, while priority adds a greater, quote, element of randomness in the game, there is a sense in which I think that the element that it is adding is separating those that can think non-linearly. And what I mean by that is from a strategy standpoint, when the double or when the priority is coming up, I'm thinking about both what could happen if I take it and what could happen if they take it. So a great example of this for me, most people probably wouldn't have seen this, and it's funny. So at Adepticon, when I was on the stream playing against Bill Souza, there came a moment in turn 2 where I hulked Marathi out and moved her out into midfield.
Okay.
And when I rewatched a stream, Martin and Eddie were baffled. They're like, what is he doing? I have no idea what he's doing. What's going on? I don't know if that was such a good play. And they were real critical of it. And so what I had done there was, it was very interesting based on priority. I wanted to force him to take priority. Okay. Given how that turn setup was. And by moving Marathi out into mid-table, what I did was I said, if you give me priority, I am into your line with Marathi. Okay. If you take priority, you're going to have to shove your dragons into Marathi.
Sure.
And so basically, what I did was I forced their hand based on priority. And so I set up a situation that was in tic-tac-toe, it's the double win. Get situation where no matter which way we go, it will play out 100% into my favor, right? But for folks that can't think about that like 3 steps ahead and in that like non-linearity, what ends up happening is that they get blindsided because they were assuming they were going to get the next turn and they get doubled.
Okay.
Or not. And so it catches a lot of people out. And so I would argue that the presence of the priority roll actually creates more tactical games, not less.
Okay. I think it's fair. So just to be clear about what we're talking about here, I'm specifically talking about the priority roll. We'll touch the battalions making you go first or drops deciding go first thing. We'll touch that second. That's a hot topic in the that's a hot topic in the comments right now. But I'm leaving that to the side. We're just keeping this to priority roll for right now. We'll take the who decides first turn thing in a minute.
Yep.
Okay. So the reason I said at the top it's a trick question of is the priority roll good or bad is because it's both. I think neither both what I'm going to say. It is not all one or the other. I don't think you could defensively say it's all good or all bad. I think that feels like an almost impossible position to take. I'm sure somebody will, but like that feels indefensible to me, right?
Yep.
Like I would tend to agree with your point that it does reward that sort of like I'm playing 5th dimensional chess, man. Okay, great, good for you. But it does reward people who think ahead, and who sort of like are considering the options and have a sort of situational awareness of the turn order and what's going to happen and where units could be if they get 2 chances to activate and so on. If that's a world you can live in. Now, flip side, by the way, let me answer that same point with the bad, which is that creates a barrier of entry for new players. Right? Newer players are innately not going to understand that tactical complexity, and so are more prone to trip across it and have a bad time. Right?
Well, I would say that they feel like, but they don't blame their lack of skill. They blame the dice roll.
Doesn't matter. Maybe not. Maybe they might blame the bad mechanic. I'm not in their head. My point is simply that a negative outcome for a newer player who does not have the tactical acumen and experience is the more likely outcome. That seems patently true, right?
Maybe.
I mean, taken across the whole of newer players, I'm not arguing that there's not going to be like somebody who shows up and they're like, nah, man, I totally get it all. I understand how this game is played. And that, they're great from the onset. Okay, wonderful. Cool. You're a, next level tactical thinker. But that's not if we took across the average, this is simply the reality, right? It is the lesser people are more likely to have a bad time from it. Lesser experienced person. I don't mean that sound way too harsh. The less experienced person. That's what I mean. Flip side to my flip side, which is where I was going, and somebody in the comments just made it. So yeah, like I'll say it exactly. The chance to suddenly pull out an unusual priority roll and have a double turn can sometimes also make a new player stay in the game longer and suddenly have a fun chance and pull them back out. Right?
Yep.
That can happen too. Sometimes through complete accident. And we could have arguments about like, well, what's the actual percentage about that look like? How often does it end up good versus bad? I don't know, man. I don't even know how I would get at a calculation like that. What I can say is they both are clearly situations that happen. Right. And so, okay.
I agree with that.
So I say all that to say, like, when we start getting into the like impacts on the gameplay, in my mind, when you start to like weigh and measure this, what happens is you're going to find lots of pros and cons on the list, right?
Sure.
And it's going to be the kind of thing that is very much aligned with sort of your psychographic profile and the elements that you value in a game will often be very much how you view this thing. Because I can list all those pros and cons, and different people but I'm not putting them on a scale, right?
Right.
People will bring their own weight to it.
Right.
It is a game element that has a lot of elements in both categories. And as such, it has a lot of opportunities for people to weight it differently, right? And say, like, no, to me, the chance that this happens, and I have to always be thinking in this weird fifth dimensional chess way, I don't find that fun. That's annoying, right? I don't find that level of randomness to be a positive experience, because I have their personal sort of psychography of value is not such that they put immense value on that. So to them, the scales tip that way. But the same person could look at the same, or sorry, a different person could look at the same facts, and it could be the opposite.
They are playing a dice game, so it's a thing.
Sure, but again, like we tend to and that's an interesting point I wanted to reference here, right? Because that's another thing that's often evoked here, right? Is like, well, this is a dice game. It's meant to be random. Fair point, right? There's a lot of times that dice have decided a game, right?
I mean, the answer is you just got to roll nines.
Just roll nines. Just roll nines is the answer, of course, always. Yes, we know that. We know this to be the truth, the one way in truth.
We need a shirt that says that.
Just roll nines. I'll work on it.
Just roll nines. Yeah.
So maybe I'll have you rolling the dice, and then my little like Fate Master bird is like changing one of them from above, like turning them into a 9. That'd be a good design. At any rate, I lost the thread there of what I was getting at. What did you just say? I derailed my own thought.
Just roll nines.
Yes.
It's a game of chance.
Yeah. So thank you. It's a game of chance. So you could say like, well, it's a random game. Randomness happens. Games get decided by dice all the time, whether this is the case or not. And I certainly agree with that, right? There is an element of number of instances though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like you could have like, when we say we had a bad game rolling to hit, maybe we noticed the misses more because they happen at a critical time, right? Like, have you ever actually recorded every hit roll you rolled for every model in a game and then computed those to see if they fall to the statistical norm, right? No. And I mean, I'm sure that somebody has, but that's a very rare thing to do, right? And what you would find is the law of large numbers would most of the time even this stuff out, right?
Yep.
Whereas a priority roll is like an incredibly weighty roll. It's very important. Yep. I don't think we'd ever dispute that. But it happens very rarely. So it's this weird mix of like really important and really rare, right?
Yeah, and I mean, the reality is that sometimes you end up having to just to gamble on the roll. Like you play for the double or whatever.
Sure.
Like if you want to have a shot, and so I mean, I think that there's value in that as well. Like, I don't know.
I'm not sure. You'll have to explain, Autumn, what you mean about the random demon rules. I'm not sure what you mean by that. But I'm interested. I am a person being like very Timmy who values randomness a lot and finds it to be very fun. So I don't mind it at all. Now, I want to talk about a meta concept here that I think is something that's important to weight that I don't think often ends up in this conversation. Because like the conversation usually contains like get good and it's a random game and stuff like that. And that's all fine. It's all been like trod 1,000 times. Either it convinces you or it doesn't. The whole point of what I went on that little tear about waiting is to prove that I don't know, it's a weird word, but to elucidate, sort of cast light, illuminate the idea that like we can all say the same words and agree on the same set of facts, that these are the pros and these are the cons, and yet still come to a completely different conclusion about the value of this game element.
Because it's based on weighting.
Because it's based on your personal valuation and weighting. Yes.
Yes.
That, which is like, I feel something that's really important to get out there. Because I feel like people sort of tend to argue from this like position of truth. Like, I have presented this number of facts, you should now be convinced. Right? Which is ostensibly what we've been doing this whole show. But I think this is an interesting case where it's so close to the middle that it's easy for the scales to tip both directions. But let me see if I can produce a sort of meta point that I don't think is often discussed. Because I've heard people say, like a couple people in the comments said randomness for randomness sake. That's not what this is at all. I do not think for a moment this is randomness for randomness sake. Okay, I would argue randomness for randomness sake is like the new Wrathmonger Mortal Wounds role. You want to look up randomness for randomness sake. That's that. Okay. Yep. So like there's a concept of surprise and suspense. I've talked about this in an old video, right? The surprise and suspense and sort of how they get used in things that fascinate us, right? So soccer, traditionally, like, you know, soccer or football, non-American football, whatever you want to call it, has a very, 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 very high level of suspense, but doesn't often have a lot of surprises. So suspense is like when you know a thing could happen, right? You can sense the tension. Yeah. Okay. Think of like older horror movies that were written better, where people built tension and then sometimes paid it off and sometimes didn't, like the first Halloween, right? That's suspense. Yep. Soccer has a lot of suspense when people start.
The classic Alfred Hitchcock scene.
There's a bomb under the table.
The bomb or the shower scene.
The shower. Like, yeah. Great example. Yes. Or Hitchcock's statement of like, it's okay if the audience knows there's a bomb under the table. If the characters don't know, that builds suspense, right? Like that's, right. I'm paraphrasing, but yes, exactly. That's suspense, right? Okay, fine. And then there's also surprise. So surprise is when something happens unexpectedly, right? And certain American sports have much higher degrees of surprise for reasons that don't seem to be well tracked. Americans seem to value surprise more than suspense. Whatever.
Like football and interceptions. That's an example of surprise.
Sure. Yeah. That's a great example. Yes. Because the nature of like the way the ball moves in football, there can often be very big surprises, right? Somebody breaks free of a tackle and runs for a 95-yard touchdown, right? Whoa, you know, something like that, right? I will admit my knowledge of football is lacking, but it tends to be.
That is an acceptable answer, Vince.
Yeah. So what this is doing, what the role does is somehow provides a little of both, right? Simultaneously. Because there's a fair amount of suspense before the roll as you're leading up to it, because it's always sort of hanging there, this sort of sword of Damocles, right? And then like surprise happens when suddenly it's surprise in the loosest sense, but when you suddenly win and get that double turn, right? It's suspense that can somehow lead to minor surprise.
Right. Or even the decision, because it's not automatic and there's a decision to be made. Like sometimes the decision for a player to give away a turn is surprising. I had an event so I had or even a first turn example. Like I had a turn given to me, a first turn, both last year and this year, that I looked at them and I was like, really? You know, like, because it wasn't like, it was so surprising. Like I have no other description for what it was. Because, like, in my mind, logically, it made no sense, and yet they gave it to me anyways.
Sure. Yeah, like, surprise, by the way, happens a lot in our game already, because we've all had that turn where we, like, rocked up and had some roll, and it was like, ba-boom, we rolled, like, all sixes or something, you know, some crazy thing happened. Like, whoa, that's a surprising thing.
You mean, like my Hallowed Knight Gryph-hound saying no to your Arcane Bolts?
Like, 3 turns in a row? Yes. Like, the game itself was already quite lent to surprise. This is a strong suspense element because you're waiting for that roll. You know it's coming. You're shaking the dice, right? How often do you sit there, by the way, and like try to let your opponent roll first, right? Like that has any effect on it? Okay, where you're like, I'm gonna let them roll first before I roll because like you want to know what you've got to beat. It's such an emotionally engaging moment. It's this like giant peak on the emotional experience table of playing the game. And so I think it has a high meta value by creating that level of engagement. And I don't think that should be written off lightly. when things are quite predictable in order,
Yes.
your engagement reduces. As a quick aside, there's a home rule we use, like a homebrew rule we use in our D&D game. So for people who also play D&D, I play a D&D game every week. And we don't roll for initiative once in combat. We roll for initiative at the top of every round. Like everybody at the table and the GM. So like round one, initiatives are this. At the bottom of that round, we re-roll initiative, and we do it every round. Okay? And that leads to an incredible... By the way, that leads to double turns. Right? Like in D, like I literally brought double turns into D&D because I feel that it's such a more valid... it's an incredibly better system for initiative, for my money, for reasons that I've talked about here, and a lot of others in D&D. There's a lot of other rules I'm not, or reasons I'm not going to unpack.
And emotional engagement and all of those other reasons.
Yeah. So like, I would highly, if you're a D&D player, give it a shot. Reroll your initiative every time. At first, you'll be a little slower because taking initiative like does take some time. At this point, we've got it down. Like I say initiative, and I just literally start writing because everybody knows the order they're supposed to read them to me in, and I have them down, and we're off to the races. And it adds a minute total to a combat. Like I mean, it's nothing. But yet it's so much more thrilling because you don't necessarily know where the bad guys go against you. You don't necessarily know if you're going to get a chance to go before the enemy gets to double tap you. Oh my God, does it create like tension in combats? It makes it so much more engaging. So at any rate, that's for the same reasons I love that. I love it here because it does create that emotional engagement through suspense. And to me, I think that is a highly valuable element. Like I weight that heavily, but that's not an element that I think is often discussed. But again, this is one of those ones that if you put a gun to my head and said, like, what do I percentage it at? I would absolutely say keep the priority roll. I mean, I voted as such on the little survey. But at the same time, I'm very sympathetic and understanding to the people who have challenges with it. Like, I get it. I get the concerns. I understand their psychology is such that they have different valuations of these things, right? And the things that I enjoy, they probably don't, right? So there you go. Okay. So I think whatever. I think it's interesting. Now let's turn to you decide though, as always, what do you think of these points we've raised? Comments and discussion. Shall we turn to the other half of this equation, Tom?
Sure.
Should drops decide first turn?
Absolutely.
Okay. Taking I like how you're staking out these strong positions.
So here's the deal.
You gotta stop making Tom roll his priority first here every time too. Go ahead, Tom.
I write a lot of lists.
Sure.
Like, as I noted today on Twitter, I have written 26 lists for a book that doesn't yet exist because it arrives on Saturday.
Sure. I mean, it exists. It is, in fact, in the world. But yes, I get what
it is. Yeah, like it has not been released yet. It's based all on leaked information. And the reality is that the lack of turn one, like this, it is an ever-present data point in list writing for me. As to like where I sit in list writing against the rest of the meta, on average, and what I'm trying to accomplish with this list. And what I mean by that is, there are some lists where I need to decide who goes first, and on those lists, you can bet your bottom dollar I am at 4 drops or less every single time.
Okay.
But there are some list designs that are designed to basically force a bad decision on the other player on whether they make me go first or second.
So if you're faced with an army that doesn't have any ability to go low drop, what's your response? Do you just not play that army? Or do you only build lists that don't care if they take the first turn?
Right, and that's exactly it. I build lists that will threaten, if they force me to go first, it's going to be a bad day for them. If they force me to go second, it's going to be a bad day for them. Like my dwarf list was this. Like I couldn't get low drop, and so what I had to do was I had to create a situation where if they let me go first, I'm going to drop a block of 30 Volkite somewhere where they don't want it to drop.
Okay.
If they force me to go second, they're potentially giving me a double turn and a heavy shooting army. So now they have to make the decision of potentially weathering a double turn against a heavy shooting army. And if they go first, then moving within range of most of my guns, which most of them were mid to short range. And so it was it was about. The list was about creating bad decisions for my opponent on the turn priority.
Okay.
And if I were to do that, like I think Skaven do this well. Skaven can create bad decision, those same bad decisions for the opponent, because it doesn't matter if they go first or second. If they go first, they're going to be able to pick off some tools. If they go second, they might get the double turn, and likewise, they're going to like. The enemy is going to be in range of more of your short range stuff, like acolytes. And so, like, I think that Skaven, play this like high drop game well. But trying to do like a alpha list at high drops become non-starters in competitive play if you're not going to be able to control going first.
Okay.
And so I say all that to say the pressure that this exerts is actually, in my opinion, on list building, not on actual individual experience on the game table.
Okay.
And so what it does is it changes the landscape of lists that end up hitting the table.
Okay. So, which I agree, this is very weighty, just like the last one, right?
Yep.
And most of what I just said still applies. Like, it has a lot of pros and cons, and people will value that differently. To make this very real, you're a classic Johnny, right?
Yep.
Like, you're a Johnny Spike. You want to, and so these the list building process has great value to you, right?
Yes.
And so having more levers to pull as part of the list making process has great value to you, as would to anybody who enjoys that as part of the hobby, right?
Yep.
In the pros column is that, in the pros column is it does give you another interesting tool to utilize, right?
And play a different type of list, because I can build a list that's going to do a certain thing because I know that it's going to almost guarantee me first turn.
And in the questionably good or bad column, let's say whatever, just in the facts at hand, right? Like, if we just had to sort of rattle the facts at hand about this.
Sure.
Right. One, as many people in the comments have pointed out, lots of people don't have battalions, and this isn't even a choice for them. So it does shut off. As you mentioned, it has impact on viable armies, which, by the way, can be good or bad, right? That's a very double-edged sword thing.
Yep.
It can control some bad actors, and it can prevent some good actors from hitting the field, right?
Yep.
But it has weight in list building, significant.
So an example of this, by the way, is imagine a Skaven where they could always go first and drop Rat Trap on you. The reality is that most Skaven lists can't drop Rat Trap on you. They can't auto go first, and actually that weakens the Rat Trap. If they could pin armies from the
if
top,
they had reliable one drops that could sort of get at what they want to do and still be a good mix, sure,
it would be so much more of a nightmare than it currently is.
Right. The question was asked of what's good about or what's good about making armies non-viable. I didn't say armies. I said certain lists. If I said armies, I apologize. I should have put a more fine point on it. Certain lists are probably not healthy, right? Like, it is a good idea that sometimes we want to corral and make certain things not too popular in the meta. For example, if the meta becomes all Alpha Strike lists, that's a bad thing, right? Like, we don't want a bunch of everybody goes in all in on turn one or whatever. There are certain things that we generally don't want to. Probably you don't want a healthy meta.
Because it creates
whole army out.
You say that because it creates unfun play experiences. That's why we don't want that.
Yeah. Just broadly, it's probably not healthy for the game, right? Now, the flip side of that same point is I would make the same argument I made earlier, by the way, on new people, right? Like, new people will tend to understand this less. They will also tend to have less of a good grasp of chaff. So, the ability for somebody who knows what they're doing to like win in the list building and setup phase becomes higher, right? Because the newer person doesn't know how to counter deploy. Like clearly deploying all your stuff first is a disadvantage, right?
Yes. So a good example of this is Relian hit a new record at Adepticon this year, where in setup, from setup to winning the game was 18 minutes. From like when he rolled up to the table, and they began setting out units, and the game was called. It was 18 minutes because he won it. He won in setup and list building and setup.
Right, and we don't want to see that. Like that's a negative, right? That sort of thing isn't a play experience we want to have replicate very often. As a weird outlier that happened once every so often because of something unusual, whatever, that's going to happen. But like that's clearly not the type of game we would want to see, right? That's like I think generally we would all agree that's
correct. Yeah,
that's not healthy for the
long term.
It's not healthy for the long term. So the reality is that we don't want to weight that too heavily. We don't want to have too many people having this ultra control, and it's distributed very unevenly. Now that probably should be the case to some degree, as you mentioned. Like I actually don't mind this being distributed unevenly, intelligently. Okay,
right.
Like purposeful inequity in this game element is no different to me than any other game element. That is to say, not every army should be ultra fast. Not every army should have a ton of shooting. Not every army should have, like should be a melee powerhouse and on and on and on. So like, this is an interesting switch to flip and say one of this army strengths. We talked about that with KO. Like an interesting way to go with a KO relaunch could be that like, hey, one of the neat things they could do with KO would be that is one of their strengths is that they very easily become one drop, right?
Yep.
Cool. And that could be like one of their advantages, right?
Yep.
And certain armies may not have access to that. Maybe like so whatever. Skaven could be your chosen example. Skaven have access to one drops. Most of them are pretty bad. But my problem is that it's not intelligently allocated right now, right? Like it's completely haphazard right now. There was no grand design on this as a game element. We're going to spit it out, right? Right now, it's distributed by who happen to be lucky enough to have books and have battalions, and moreover, have battalions where that's the current thought pattern on battalions, right? Battalions have changed their design structure so much over the years in how they work and in how they allow one drops, right? That like we just have this complete patchwork quilt of like how this stuff is distributed, right? But if you were going to start from zero and say this is how it's going to be, we're going to have this rule, and we're going to use this as a game element, as a balancing tool, I think that could be highly valuable. That is not the current state of play, right?
I agree. It is haphazard is a great way to describe the current state of things.
Right. So, by the way, putting battalions in the GHB, as was mentioned by somebody earlier, that's a great solution to that, honestly, right?
Yep.
Like you could put out a lot of battalions in a single GHB and suddenly, perhaps intelligently, like lay some of this out, right? I will say that, like, on the whole, this one's a lot tougher. If I had to rate the priority roll, I would rate it as like, for me personally, when I look across the game as a whole, I think it's much healthier for it to be a thing than not. Okay.
Yep.
Just like our previous conversation. I understand the negatives, but I think like when I look across the game and I say like holistically, I think this is a better, like the game is better for having it than not for reasons I've laid out. Right.
Yep.
But when I look at this one, it's a lot harder for me to say that that's the case.
So let me ask you a question.
I understand your waiting, but like I don't care about lists at all. I hate the list building phase.
I know you do.
Right.
Like you make lists like the moment of like 10 minutes before you put models on the table.
What is that? Yeah, when I'm playing, yes. I mean, like for my weekly game, people show up at my house and I go, "What are we playing tonight?" And then I walk in here and make a list. Right, and that's how I think about it. For a tournament, figure out when the lists are due for that tournament and count back one day. That's when I made my list. Right.
Yep. That is exactly how you do it. Where for me, I am already in the process of narrowing down my NashCon list for the end of August.
Sure. Of course you are. So, like, I understand why you value this, but at the same time, this is the kind of thing that I feel like we could change this, and I'm not sure it would overall negatively influence the game. I don't see the same risk factor here, especially in the current world of inequity. You can still weight it.
When do you think? So when would turn one be determined? Would it be determined post setup or pre setup?
Pre setup.
Yeah, I mean, what it would do is it would change the range of lists that get deployed. Because at that point, it doesn't matter if you're 100 drops or 5 drops. And so, like, a lot of battalions probably would get kicked to the curb. Because people would just, like, I think that people would be less incentivized to use battalions.
Maybe. It depends on how much you weight it still. Right? Like, you could have a weighting. Right now, we have a deterministic mechanism. Right?
Yes.
Like, you could have a weighted mechanism that could still be quite impactful. And perhaps that's the way, right? Like, people always say, like, maybe they get a +1. I don't care. Maybe they win. Maybe the lower drops win ties and makes the choice. Maybe they get a +1 to their roll. Maybe they get to roll 2 dice and take the best. I don't care. There's 100 different ways we could talk about, and it'd just be a question of weighting the math and where you want the weight to sit, right? But, like, the other option here is, like, do the GHB battalion thing and pay attention to all the factions. And, like, if by the end of this year, let's imagine a world by the end of this year, my opinion on this could change if by the end of this year we have, 8 or 9 more army books, okay?
Sure.
And, like, the GHB actually contained, they did put out a GHB with, like, battalion options or something like that, which, by the way, battalions do exist in GHB. Like, that does happen, right?
Right, but it's been for the factions that have been included in the GHB.
Yeah. So, like, if that was the case where suddenly they had, within the scope of a year, sort of do bring everybody up to a more even footing, okay, then maybe that's a different world, right? And maybe we can keep the deterministic nature of it, and that's fine. Because I understand your valuation. Like, I get it as a list building tool, but I'm not sure that as a weighted mechanism, it still wouldn't be there as a list building tool, right? My point being is, I'm not sure it needs to be a deterministic element to have value in list building phase.
Right, but, like, let's say it's a +1 or whatever.
Or something. It is weighted in some way, yes.
Right, but, like, if it is, unless it is heavily skewed one direction to the point of almost being deterministic, I don't see, like, that, like, yeah, maybe it's just individual weighting at that point, individual valuation, sorry. But, like, for me, it has to have a heavy weighting in order for it to skew my perspective. Otherwise, I am almost every time going to throw out the battalion.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, I will say I usually take, like, why do I take battalions? Okay, because most of my lists contain battalions. I take them very frequently. I don't often have super low drops, but I almost always have battalions. And the reason I take battalions is usually because I want the command point and I want the artifact and I like the rule in the battalion. Like, most of the battalions I run have, like, one rule, and if I kind of like the rule, I like the extra artifact and I like the command point, and the battalion isn't overpriced, I'm usually pretty happy with it. Right? That's usually what ends up in my armies. Like, so there you go. Like, I take well, it's not the proper name, but whatever the claw pack is in the Skaven army a lot. That's often the backbone to my Skaven armies that I've been playing. Right? Its rules are fine. I don't hate them. I've used them a few times. It's kind of a neat thing. Doesn't come up every so often, but that's okay. But I really value having a command point to start with in my Skaven army, and I really value having the extra artifact. And, like, in the end, I'm usually still a very high number of drops, even with a battalion. So I'm still valuing them, right? My point is, like, I think you could still get them to be, I think battalions could still be a real choice. We might need to have a discussion about, like, some battalion rules need to be brought up a little. There's no doubt that there's like some pretty weak sauce battalions out there as far as their rules go, right? No doubt. So that's fine. But this one's a real challenge because it's wrapped up in so many things, right? As we discussed, like there's so much like spider webbing here because of how many things this touches, right?
Yeah, I mean, what I'll say is that like battalions like are gatekeepers right now for like controlling like, you know, tax units and stuff like that to get to at certain abilities. And yeah, I don't know. I just
so like the element of, by the way, so I wanted to, Autumn in the comments had said if random is fun, then random, like if random is fun on the last one, then you should support random here. Okay.
Right.
You know, fair point. Like that could be a fair line to take. That's not necessarily true, by the way. You can value different game elements at different points in time for the other decisions they make. Like you're Autumn, you're overvaluing consistency in these game elements. Like inconsistency has value. That is to say, like making different things valuable at different points in the play experience has value because then it stretches different muscles. If everything pulls in the exact same direction, the game can often become such that like doing one thing is all you need to do, and you do that one thing repeatedly. So having different things strike different value at different times, you know, incentivizing randomness here can be good. Incentivizing this thing can be good here. For the same reason that oftentimes you can have magic cards that play in very different ways and speak to very different people and have absolutely no purpose in some way. Like you can value this design being really good for decking strategies and discard strategies and having no value over here and so on and so forth. So like you could say that I value both these things, fully aware of the inconsistency, and say I do that because of the knock-on benefits they have. And I think that could be defensible. But I also see your side, right? Like it could also be fine to take the position that like, no, randomness should be what determines a lot more, right? Like I value the priority roll, and I think the same stuff I talked about it being good here would also be there, would be good here. Right? So yeah, I mean, this is, I think, this one's so wrapped up. Like I don't know that this controversy has an easy way out.
Yeah, I mean, I know for me, like I think about, because like I hear the idea that like randomness should always be fun, but like I'm also not randomly rolling at what units I'm putting down on the table.
Sure. It's the constant tension between like how much is under your control and how much is sitting under random, and there's some balance you're trying to strike. Sure.
Right. Yeah, I don't know.
You have you have a much higher valuation than many of this game.
Yes, on consistency and no, I would agree with that.
Yeah. So like I understand that there are many people like you, okay, but your weighting will naturally fall very heavy in that direction, right?
Indeed.
Whereas honestly, if tomorrow if tomorrow they said it's like this is the way it's determined, if like I woke up and they published this thing that was like, from now on, who decides first turn is based on this. You roll a die at the beginning of the game when you both exchange your lists and drops, and drop count, sorry. And whoever has the lower drops gets to roll twice and take the best result. High roll wins. That was what I woke up with tomorrow. I'd be like, okay. Like, I don't care. It would literally not affect my perception of the game at all. Okay. Like I would find the game no better or worse in that world from a personal perspective.
That is not the case with me.
Sure. And I imagine that's like, I am sure people will have very different responses. But like to me, whatever. It's cool. It puts no difference to my experience. So I don't care. Always always the strongest position to take in a controversy argument. Yeah, whatever. It's all fine. That's always a winner. Go for that one. But I mean, I do kind of feel like in the end, the game is clearly fine with it. I don't think it would be the end of the world if they changed it. Okay, like that is to say, we've gotten on and built a strong game and a strong community, and lots of people having fun in the game with it. If that suddenly went away, I'm not sure it would be the end of the world. So there you go. Like, probably fine. Okay, cool. Let's see. What else do we have? What else is controversial? Tom, you got anything you want to add in here? All these topics are my topics that I picked.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about post publication changing of war scrolls.
Okay, sure. Are we wrapping up like change cadence in here? Because I think that's really also part of this, right?
Yeah. So like let's like change.
When and how often do we make changes?
Make changes to like hard rules.
Yes, not just points, because I think we're all on board with like points change. They change once a year. That seems pretty comfortable. Great. Okay, so fine. Thank you. Next. Okay. Maybe I'm undercutting that. Maybe some people are pushing for more rapid points changes, but let's leave that to the side for now. Let's talk about rules.
So obviously this came to a head for me with the KO Thunderer change. For those of you that don't know, that are new to our channel.
By the way, I want to shout out Dan in the comments, who literally just said the phrase before you started talking. I know you can't see the comments. Dan said immediately he goes to the KO Thunderers, and then not 10 seconds later, you're like, I'm gonna talk about KO Thunderers. He had your number, buddy. He was like, bam, I know what Tom's about. Okay, yep. Anyway, go ahead.
Because, so here's the deal. Like, I have 55 Thunderers sitting over there on the shelf, like, boxed. Missing one model from every box. Those were purchased under the pretense that the book that GW had published, they intended to mean what they had published.
Okay.
And so I saw the rules and I went, oh, those are the rules. I want that thing. I'm going to buy that thing. I bought that thing. And then a couple, in this instance, it was like 4 months later. They're like, no, that's not that thing. Okay.
Yeah, it was within a pretty rapid time period. I don't remember how fast.
It was May, like the end of April, May to August. So, I mean, it was like 4 months. Like, it was a decent amount of time. Okay. Now we live in a world, and like I lost my shit, obviously, because like that was like what, $400, retail value. But we live in a world now where a Khorne book is published.
Yeah, sure.
And they're like, we're like, hey, look at this! Look at this skull cannons! Aren't those things awesome? Oh man, I want to run 3 skull cannons now because they're usable, and I'm gonna get some Wrathmongers with those. 2 weeks later, yeah, that doesn't work. That thing that you bought for that reason, that doesn't work anymore. That we published 2 weeks ago.
Okay. All right. Is that an exception? Is there any other example in the FAQs where they like so dramatically changed something like that in recent memory? So let's go back to our Nurgle time frame. I feel that feels like a good sinking point to have those discussions.
They did it with Zinj, but that's farther back.
Yep. I would argue no, but I might be forgetting something. Certainly, it's not on the top of mind, so it can't be. It's like the inability to recall it. Yeah. Says something, right?
Yeah, but I mean, but it has led to this attitude for those in the know, and what I mean by in the know is know not to pull the trigger on things that are obviously too strong.
Well, the real part about this one is there was nothing about it that seemed wrong or too strong. Like, I played against that. It was fun. It seemed perfectly fine. But at any rate, like, that was where this one really hit the mark of like, you know, right? Like, there are reads, like I talk about this in the FAQ video I did. Like there are sometimes where we read them when we get the book and we're like, oh, that's clearly a misprint. We're just going to wait on the FAQ to fix this, right? Where it's so glaringly obvious, right?
Yep.
Then like you have to almost argue in bad faith to think that it's what they intended. Whereas like this one didn't read like that, right? This just read like that's how it is. Cool.
Yep. Yeah, I can't think of anything actually of the recent world that we've been in. But regardless, that's what just happened, and people lost their damn minds. And I think that.
By the way, my stance on this is they should back it out. It's an FAQ. It's not in the real book. Just back it out. Back out the FAQ change.
Just
update it.
The FAQ.
They did it in 40K. It happened.
Yeah, I mean,
and somebody they complained. I don't remember what book it is, but they backed out a change.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there would be wisdom in that. I think that it's bad form when you publish something and then have a dramatic FAQ turnaround that dramatically changes how a thing works, such that like I don't know. And obviously, like I feel like I feel for the Khorne folks because I've been there.
Sure.
And it sucks.
Well, I mean, I had 3 skull cannons before. I have 3 skull cannons now. It's fine.
Yeah, sure. And you're not going to use them. I mean, it like. But so an example of this, like another one that I expected to come down the line but never did, was the Grimghast Reapers, like the FAQ errata that added.
By the way, some people are talking about Storm Fiends in the comment. Storm Fiends aren't what we're talking about right now. That was a change in the book, right? Like that just happened. They didn't FAQ that. That wasn't like they put out a book and then said it works like A, and then an FAQ came out 2 weeks later and said, oh, nope, actually it works like B, which is what Tom is talking about, right? We're not like when a book comes out, everything's open. That's it. If you get a book published, every rule you have is on the table, except that. Okay.
Right. Like your Blood Secretor, like everybody knew that things were coming down the line for like the rules were up for grabs.
Every rule on your book is up for grabs when a book comes out. Period. They can change anything they want. That's it. That is the official time that they do that. Right? What we're saying is outside of that, when you publish a book, there should be an expectation that some stuff's going to change.
Right.
If you're thinking otherwise, I'm not sure you've really caught into what's happened for the past all the years of Warhammer.
When they publish a book, you shouldn't expect that 2 weeks later, whatever you've bought has been negated because they changed their mind and printed something wrongly. And that's the bitter pill.
Sure.
And I know that like they need to. So to their credit, they need to be able to pull the trigger on things where something slipped through the design process.
Sure.
Okay.
Yep.
So, and I fully affirm this, that like if something is egregious and it slips through the process, it needs to be able to be fixed. And I want to affirm GW's ability to do that. But this was not that. That's not what the skull cannons were.
Well, it's a gray line, right? To some degree. Like I personally agree with you.
Right.
But the line of where that falls, good luck. I'd love to see you give me a bright line there.
Sure.
You know, part of the argument is, well, you should just wait for the FAQ. Like you should always wait for the FAQ before you buy things. I think you should always wait. My personal rule is if you're going to spend more than $20, you should wait 2 weeks before you do it, because you see if you still want the thing in 2 weeks. That's just my rule for life. Okay, I don't spend more than $20 unless I give it 2 weeks to think about it. Often I think a lot longer than that. So like just a good finance hot tip for you there in life in general. I mean, obviously it's, groceries and stuff like that don't count, like your regular expenses. I'm not saying I delay my house payment or my mortgage payment by 2 weeks, but you know what I mean? For optional expenses. How about that?
I did not do that with Fire Slayers.
Sure. But yeah, again, obviously, as was raised in the comments, and where I was going is people new to the hobby won't know that. People get excited, of course. You want to go buy your toys, And there should be some level of consistency there. If something's super egregious or wrong, yes, it needs to have the power to be fixed. Yes, that's not a bright line, which is something we have to take into account. Like, this always has the chance to happen, and justifiably so. It's not like we can say, don't change things. But my argument would be, and what I argued in my FAQ video, was the general principle should be do no harm. Right? So, like, you don't generally, like, it should be a sort of Hippocratic oath. Like, in general life, you don't just start cutting organs out of people, right? That's not good. But if they're going to die, unless you, like, remove, some organ that's swelling or injured or cancerous, you take it out. Right? Now you cut into a person. The weighting changed. And so, like, I think that should be the same sort of Hippocratic oath with these kinds of changes. When you looked at the skull cannon thing, they should have said, well, like, yeah, that's not what we intended. Okay, like, oops, we made an oopsie daisy, but that's how that is now. Because, like, overall, it doesn't, who cares? It's not that big a deal. It wasn't like you've published worse you've published more off-kilter stuff in the past couple months that could be fixed. We just talked about them earlier, right? And, like, in general, it does more harm than good to make the change, because people have made decisions and have made purchases, right?
Yeah, like, so a corollary to the do no harm is, like, don't touch the models. And what I mean by that is, like, I don't have a problem with them changing the valuation of weapon loadouts.
Okay.
So, for example, like, I don't have a problem with them changing the stats on, like, Volkite Berserkers, like, double axes versus, like, shield pick. If, like, one was predominant in a prior version, like, swapping it to the other being the stronger option. Or full axes for, like, I don't have a problem with that. A lot of people are, like, do have a problem with that. I don't. Okay. What I do have a problem with is suddenly saying, actually, when you dual wield, you have to use a pickaxe and a off hand axe. So there is no now loadout for two hand axes. Okay.
So the invalidation of a particular build?
Yeah, like...
Is that the line you're drawing?
Yeah, for me, it's like... It's changing war scrolls such that people have to cut up their models that they finished.
Not just for reasons of, like, well, thing A is better and I want thing A. You're saying, like, that's more of a personal choice thing. You decided that's that, right?
Yes.
Whereas what you're saying is the line to you is the way I have constructed my models is no longer valid.
Right. And, like, so this is the other aspect of what happened with the Thunderer change. Is that, like, there was, like, I have a unit of 10 Thunderers. That's why I said that I was missing one model from each box. And the reason why is because previously you could create an entire unit of Aether Cannons.
Sure.
Like, and so that's the unit. And so, like, I built a unit of that thing, which is with 10 Aether Cannons. Mm-hmm. You cannot run that. Like, so that is now an illegal unit. Like, that is not a thing that I can run.
Okay.
And so, like, in a world where I bought a box or whatever, and then bought all the bits for that box, okay, and had 10 of that thing, like, now I could go make a bunch of other units, like, I could fill them out and put them in their right distribution. But, like, if I had bought a box of 10 and then got the bits for those 10 and built that thing, I can't run that thing now, because they've now changed how that... And so, like, anything that's going to force people to take a knife to their models that they've already... like, based on rules that you had created, I think that's a problem.
This is an interesting one for me. I think that... Okay, go ahead.
And I would argue that, like, I think that the Storm Fiend change sits in the space.
Okay.
Like, I'm like...
Well, sure, you could have certainly had units that, like, there are loadouts you could have your units built into that just aren't valid anymore, right?
Right. And so now, like, they can't play the models that they had bought and painted in good faith previously. At all. Like, zero. Like, they have to either cut their models or buy more boxes and supplement what they previously had.
Yeah, I mean, look, in general, I like... I dislike any discussion that includes KO in this, right?
Sure.
Because like it's just how long do they have to wear that weight around their neck, man? Okay, like asked and answered. You're just badgering the witness at this point, right? Like they have admitted fault. It was not a good rollout. What do you want to do? Right? Like they don't have a DeLorean. We
Which
can't
is
go
why
back
I
in
jumped
time.
on Storm
It all happened.
Sure,
Right.
but now we're on Stormbeam. Like, but I'm pointing out like that anytime, like I think a general rule of thumb is don't touch people's models.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, see, I'm not sure I agree with that. Okay. So this is an interesting one. I will say that in general, they do this pretty rarely. This seems fair, right? Like if we think of the number of scrolls with weapon options that have been released, like the number of times that they have invalidated previous things. Again, let's just set KO to the side, okay? We set that tire fire over here, okay?
You mean we're not allowed to use that trump card anymore?
Well, I mean, like that horse died so long ago. Okay, stop it. You're just like literally beating a red stain on the ground at this point. The like since then, this has been what? Storm Fiends? What else did this happen with? I mean, I'm sure it happened with something else I'm forgetting. I'm just trying to like legitimately I'm asking the question, what else did this happen with?
I honestly I don't think it has happened with a lot of stuff. Like, but it's a corollary. Like, this is what I'm saying. Like, in general, this is something that I think that is part of the do no harm axiom.
Oh, somebody said in the comments that happened with Blood Warriors. I don't know what happened with. Like, is there some combo that is invalid now with Blood Warriors? I didn't catch it if it is.
No, it's just that the shields are better now. And so people have built one way and now they want to build the other way. It goes back to the, like, that's my Volkite example of, like, one build is now better than the other build.
Well, you'll have to give the example in the comments of Blood Warriors so we can prove Tom wrong if he's wrong.
Okay.
So, because I missed it if it's there. I'm not doubting you. I'm just not. I legitimately didn't catch it. So the Gorglaive on the champ. Okay, the champion can't use. Oh, many people said. Okay. So the champion cannot use the Gorglaive anymore. Oh, interesting.
Sure. That seems like a problem.
Okay.
If like they allowed it previously and they don't now. That is a breaking of the do no harm axiom.
Okay.
Because now like they have models that they can no longer use.
Yeah. All right. So if I had to rate those two, so like good. I'm glad we have a second example. That's cool. I mean, that's not cool that it happened. But let's talk that through real quick, okay?
Yep.
I dislike the Blood Warrior one more than the Storm Fiend one.
Okay.
Let me see if I can unpack that.
And I get it, and I agree. But continue.
Okay.
Like I understand where you're going with this, and I agree.
So let me back it up even another step. Starting principle, I don't care. I'm the least WYSIWYG person in the world. Tell me what your unit has, and I'm good. As long as you can keep straight who's got what, I don't care. You can use that unit of Thunders. You use whatever you want. I love conversions. I like people who do and chop up their models and have weird ways. Aether cannons aren't real. That's not a thing. That's a made-up imaginary gun thing. Your Aether cannons can look like whatever you want. So, like, whatever. When people show up, I've never once had a problem. If they say, this is the unit and it has this, great. Cool. As long as you have a list and you can keep your army straight and you can explain it to me. I find things that look too samey much more problematic than things that have deltas. Personal taste.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. But that's just my stance. I'm just getting my biases out there. Okay.
Yep.
Like, I don't care if suddenly a different gun or a different loadout is better. Like if like axe and sword was really good and now it's axe and axe, you could just roll up with the same dudes you built with axe and sword and tell me they're two axes. Neat. That's just what that thing looks like to them. Cool. Most weird swords in the AoS world are so weird otherwise. It's like, great. You got two axes on that unit? Sweet. I'm happy for you. Let's do this. Okay? Like, please don't hack your models up. That's insane. All right. Now, personal opinion.
Yep.
Okay. Now, the Blood Warrior thing is egregious to me because it's like, why? That didn't need to change. It wasn't that big a deal, right? That just feels like, who cares? You're just making somebody forcibly change a thing because the Gorglaive is like it is just a one-off thing. So you want some specific guy to have it. Like the way I would do it is actually just gluing a top knot to a different model and saying that's my champion now. Like I would go find a spare top knot in my bits, paint it and glue it to a different model and say he's that. And then this dude who had the Gorglaive, he's just a normal dude now. There you go. Job's a good one, right? I certainly wouldn't hack a model apart. But like it's just punitively there's no reason for that. When I look at the Storm Fiends, I can go, or what will happen with Arco, by the way, because Arco are going to get hit by this.
Yeah.
Then you get sure. There becomes the question of like, is it healthier for the way we intended this unit to be designed, to be used, to be present in the game, to be bought by everybody in the future, right? You have to sort of weigh all these things, and they could make a decision that like, look, with Storm Fiends. So we came up with 2 examples out of, I don't know how many hundreds of War Scrolls have been published in the Miracle Book, right?
Hold on. Though, like, let me put a pin on that something though. There's a difference between saying I'm equipping something that isn't in the box, right?
Yeah. Because like now their strategy now is we match to what's in the box.
Right. But there's a difference because like even Storm Fiends, you could have built things that were in the box and still be out of spec now.
Sure.
Because they have said like this one can have this or this loadout, this one can have this or this loadout, this one can have this or this loadout. And like to me that's egregious because I built it how you told me to build it. I didn't even add additional bits. And now you're saying I can't build it that way.
Yeah, okay. I mean, like, again, maybe they could have had slightly different rules on it. Like, that's fine. That doesn't change my point, right? Like, okay, so maybe they should have allowed differing combinations. That still wouldn't have changed the world where the person who went out and built 3 rattling guns or 3 warfire throwers isn't valid. Okay? Yep. That's like, my point is, they seem pretty reserved with this change. Like the Blood Warriors thing is just weird. I don't know. That almost feels like it was unintentional. That just seems silly. Like I'm not undercutting it. That's why I'm saying I think it's the worst one because it's punitive for no reason. It didn't need a nerf. It was fine how it was. Why are we doing that? That's just literally inconveniencing people, right?
Yep.
This like nobody was like, oh, Blood Warrior champions with Gorglaives. That's why I lost the game. Okay. Whereas like the Storm Fiend thing, like that could be justifiable, right? Like you could say, well, for the long-term health, we don't want to force new players to when people buy this kit, we want it to be valid. So we're gonna make this change once and it sucks. We know it sucks. That's why we've done it a grand total of theoretically 1 time in the past, let's say year and a half out of 700 War Scrolls we've republished or whatever, I don't know, 500, 400, 300, some big number, right? It's less than 1% by a good measure. It would be like 1 that they legitimately made this decision with. And so I could see the argument, right? Like, again, you might find that more or less compelling. It sucks if you're the one hit by it, no doubt. Like that's terrible for you. And I'm not trying to discount that at all because that sucks. It just sucks, bottom line, right? And the question becomes like, does the pain of however many people that affects, is that worth like the rebalance of the unit, the ability for them to be more predictable, to be pointed more accurately, and to have a better experience for everybody who buys them in the future? Yeah, maybe is my answer, right? Like either way, my argument would be like, as they have done, this should be done extremely rarely. And they seem to have mostly stuck to that. Right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
So that's cool. To me, it's not so one-sided. Like I feel like saying you should never do this, that's prohibitive to a detrimental point, right? There could just be something that they had, that the way the rules were constructed with some of these legacy scrolls just doesn't make sense now, because of like other things. So you know, and by the way, Doom, I'm not arguing the champion does do a lot of work. He does. I know. I'm saying that like it's punitive for no reason. That's a just egregious change. Like it's not the biggest deal, but it's just it's no reason to stepping on it's a thorn in the paw. Stepping on a D4. Anyway, so let's talk about the cadence of rules changes, right? So because I think that's the real interesting discussion to have here. How often should these scrolls be changing? When things are out of whack, how often do we expect them to change? Take Gristlegore or your Skaven thing. Do we need to wait on? Should we be waiting on GHB 19 to make Rat Trap 200 points or 240 points? Whatever is an actual valuation for it. Okay, because it's clearly not 100, right?
Right.
Like,
I don't disagree with that.
So, is there? How often do we actually get in there and start mucking with rules and invalidating books? Right?
Yeah.
You bought a physical book, and I'm going to change something in it. Now, not invalidating the whole book. Let's not be melodramatic here, right? But the more often this happens and the more you change, the less value the book has. As we've joked, to make your reference before you do, you like the KO book is completely worthless right now, right? It has 0 value because none of those rules are correct. I shouldn't say 0 value. It has a lot of cool story in it. From a rules perspective, it has 0 value right now.
I didn't say anything. Continue.
So like anytime you're making a change, you are lowering the sort of like cohesiveness of somebody's ability to just walk up with their book and feel like they've made a good purchase, right? Yeah. And not carry around a pack of FAQ with it or something.
Right.
So how often does that change? What's the right answer?
I mean, I honestly think once per year is appropriate.
I think I tend to agree with that. And this is something that has a lot of discussion. We should there's a pros and cons to be had here, right? Yeah. Like it sucks to get punched by Gristlegore.
Yep.
Right? It does. Cool. We all agree on that.
Yep.
What's the appropriate amount of time we let that run rampant? And you might say, well, maybe it needs to be adjusted to the severity of the issue. Right? That is to say, if you've got a more outstanding problem, you address it quicker. And I think they do that in terms of the FAQ. Like we have this, let's say like in a ticketing system, you would have like Sev 0, Sev 1, Sev 2, Sev 3 tickets, right?
Yep.
And so like generally Sev 0 and 1 get addressed in the FAQ. They're so glaring and obvious, they just get fixed immediately, right?
Yep.
The problem is, what do we have when we have Gristlegore is arguably this sort of Sev 2 problem where it's significantly impacting the workflow of the users, right. But it's not breaking the system completely, right? It's not preventing the game from working in some way or the book from working in some way, right? How fast do we address that stuff?
I think that like a maximum of 1 year, and I think that what that looks like is. And that is the GHB, like a grand adjustment where we get a major FAQ drop with a points adjustment, like a combination of those two tools in order to fix, said issues.
Yeah, like right now our cadence is like 2 times a year there's a big FAQ, one of which is times to the
GHB.
Mm-hmm, to the GHB. So, like, what's ostensibly happening is you're getting, like, let's call it every half year, you're getting kind of like a half weight change, and every once a year, you're getting a full weight reset.
Yes.
Ostensibly. Yep. Right?
Yep.
And that's kind of the mix of the cadence.
Yeah, and I feel okay about that. Like, I think I'm okay with that, honestly.
Are they in the right place right now?
I think so.
Does there need to be a mechanism to address things that we that maybe pop up? Like, does there need to be an escape valve for like the Sev 2 stuff?
I mean, like, technically the half adjustment can catch that Sev 2 stuff.
Mm-hmm. Sure, good.
So you're never going more than 6 months.
Yeah.
And I think that I don't know. Maybe I'm too lenient here. But I think we're at the right cadence, even though a lot of people don't like it.
Yeah, because so we should talk about why not fix it immediately, right? What is the downside? Right? That's a fair question somebody might ask who's listening to this, right?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't we want these things just hammered down with a fair amount of regularity?
Because you're creating market instability.
Yeah, well, yes, in the broader sense of like the market of how the game is understood and played, right? Not like sales. Because the more changes you make, the more unstable the game feels, the less confidence you have in building and assembling forces, the more you invalidate books, the more people who pay less attention fall off, right? Fall off the current rule set. Because there's a lot of people playing this game who aren't as dialed in. And the nightmare scenario, as I said in the FAQ video, is like people who are less dialed in show up to the game store or a tournament, think their rules work one way, and then find out they work a different way, right?
Yep.
Because the pace of change is so fast, you're just not keeping up, right? Like because you could get to that point pretty easily, right?
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, I feel like what we'll call like once a year we have this kind of big tilt, right? Where we just like we flip the puzzle over and rebuild it in our HB big FAQ. And then the half year we get kind of like, I don't know, what do we want to call that? Like
all the egregious stuff is caught at the half year mark.
Right, hopefully. And it's interesting because the element of that they change is opaque to us.
Yes.
That they have a different vision. I think back to the last half year change, right?
Yep.
And a lot of us were like, why were these things in doc changed? And well, the answer was because they had a line of vision to what was coming and thought, okay, the meta's gonna naturally, sort of work this out. And to a degree, they've been proven right. Like Doc's, win percentage has been falling. Their occurrence in the meta has been falling. Like, yeah, there seems to be some truth to that. Time will tell whether or not that's actually accurate, right?
Right.
But that lack of transparency we have into what's happening means that we oftentimes feel like this stuff hasn't been addressed.
Right. Yep.
By the way, I don't know if there's anything that would innately fix the FEC concern. And I want to bring up something that Uncle Adam just mentioned in the comments, which is like, what is the world of digital updates and integration, right? Like they seem shockingly behind the times on this, right?
Yeah.
The War Scroll updates are pretty consistent. So when rules directly change on a War Scroll, those generally get updated, right? Like you can generally pull a War Scroll out of the app and you don't have to go check FAQs for the most part, right? The War Scrolls in the app are pretty good. But like as it stands right now, you buy a digital copy of a book, it might as well be the print copy of a book, right?
Right. It never changes.
It never changes. And it's a tough line to walk because there's a huge amount of Warhammer players that love physical media, right? Yep. Like I buy my books. I want my physical books. I love my physical books, right?
Yep, I do.
And that's obviously not going to get patched, Is there a concern? Does there become a problem if the digital version of the book updates and the book version can't, right? Because it's a book. It's made of paper. Is that a problem if they become different, right? Because that's what would happen if they started updating them.
I think that actually it would be in best business. It would be in the best. It would be in the best situation for GW, because the overhead on digital media is actually lower, so their profit margins are going to be a lot higher.
Sure, but they're not like. Are you saying get rid of physical books?
No, I'm saying that they create a natural incentive structure that people want to buy the digital because it gets updated, and their profits are higher on the digital product, and so it's a win-win for them, where it pushes us towards digital product, and that digital product itself stays more up to date.
Yeah, I mean, it's this one's tricky because I can see people revolting or being angry, which is kind of funny. That their physical books have no recourse, but the digital ones do. Because then the cry would be, well, you're going to make me buy everything twice because I want the physical media too. Right?
No, you just provide a discount for the for you actually provide the discount code in the books for, like, you don't give it free.
That's always been tried and never worked.
Right.
Right? Because providing the code in the book means people in game stores scratch them off and pull them. Right? And then you get used game codes. That has been done many times to very little success. Right? Putting the code in the book means people sneak in, like standing in the game store, flip the book, read it, take out the code, close the book, go home, use it. And then the next person who actually buys the book doesn't have a valid code. Right? So like tying those two together, I understand that can be a challenge. I would actually see it the other way around.
Okay.
By the way, the obvious way to do this, in my mind, is actually to reverse that. By the way, I saw somebody said shrink wrapping fixes that. Okay, sure it does. Because no one's ever just taken the shrink wrap off a book in a game store. Game stores that are generally manned by one person who's paying, let's call it a modicum of attention. Right? Any security measure, I love this. People are like, put it in a sealed envelope. People have tried this so many times in different ways, and it just fails outright. You can put it under lock and freaking key. Like, people are highly incentivized if it means they can get it something free, right? To get at it. The answer is flip it. Okay? Because the book sits on the shelf in the game store.
Yeah.
Okay? The digital product sits in your phone or your iPad. The answer is when you buy the digital media, you get automatically, like the last page of the digital media is a little scanny coupon, right? And when you take the scanny coupon to your game store, your participating independent retailer or Games Workshop store, and by the way, it would have to include independent retailers, right? You just simply hand them your phone and they scan it, and it creates some massive discount for the physical book, but that doesn't hit the retailer. G-Dubs refunds that rebate price. You see what I'm saying? Like, that just becomes part of the way that that's done. So, like, that's how you could lock that down, right? Because then somebody's got to, like, steal your phone to get at the code, right?
And you can control, like, each code only being redeemed once, etc.
Correct. Yeah, because, like, it's a digital code. Once it's scanned, it can be sent in. Boom, it's done. Your phone knows it's scanned, right? And can be used right there. Like, all that can be very tightly controlled. And
I don't hate that.
And there you go. By the way, that also does incentivize people to pick up the digital media and makes the physical media the collector's item, which is what they would ultimately want, because they want to, if they go to an automatic update system, that would actually create the proper incentive structure. The diehard collectors buy the books, which is what I will always do. And I would get the physical media first, right? Or I get the digital media first, then I'd go to my store and I'd buy my book. Boom. Right?
Yep. Sure.
Easy. And like, to me, that's the way you actually control this. If they were gonna like revolutionize this supply chain to a 21st century model,
Sure.
that would do this, because then people buy the digital first. Only some people buy the books. They can update the books with their changes. We get one unified source, and people buy the books as collector's items. So there you go. So there you go. And I think that, by the way, that should be the way this goes. Now, as to the cadence, to return back to the cadence discussion, since we went kind of far afield there, I agree with you that I think the current cadence is correct. I want to see the integration we talked about happen. I actually don't find the speed bad. I think it's especially not bad because let's say it's 6 months. Okay?
Sure.
Who's that the worst for? Who is the most impacted by that speed?
the people who have planned for events that something's like.
That's another downside to frequently changing rules. It's a nightmare for TOs. I didn't even mention that. That's also true. But anyways,
Yeah.
no. Who is that the worst case for? If we have to put up with sort of, Sev 2 issues or whatever we want to say for 6 months, who has the worst experience out of that?
The actual user that is using the Sev 2.
The most. The person who plays against or with the most, right? That's who's experiencing it the most. The people who play the most are your hardest core players. Tends to be the most, that is, say, the people who get the most games in tend to be the hardest core tournament players, the hardest core people. Who cares? Who cares about you? Sorry, people. I don't really mean that. I love all of our hardcore tournament players. I go to more tournaments than most, and I'm not a hardcore tournament player. I, go to 4 tournaments a year. But my point is that those are the players who also are the best equipped to deal with it. Right? They're the most knowledgeable about the meta, the most knowledgeable about the enemy armies. They're the most knowledgeable about how to answer those things, and they're the most willing to put up with it and fight around it and see it as a challenge. Right? So the people you are impacting the most are the people best equipped to deal with it. Whereas if you go to a faster change cadence, the people who are the most affected are the people least equipped to deal with it. Right? Whereas if once every 6 months you make a big deal of this, hopefully get enough attention that even the sort of casual people pay attention, then the changes become more organic, especially if they become properly integrated, right? Where you get a digital pass-through. So my argument would be the need for a faster cadence is speaking to the market that needs it the least. They might be the loudest, right? They're certainly the loudest.
Yes.
And that's fine. They can be loud.
Damn competitive gamers.
It's okay. Competitive gamers also have the highest vested interest in everything being the nicest because they do experience everything the most. You walk across hot coals once real fast, you can do it. You stand on the hot coals or run across them and keep running back and forth. Your feet eventually heat up, right? Friction's friction for a reason. So I get it. I get why it's bothersome. But my point is that I think we, if I'll count myself amongst this for the moment, but we as the people who are most dialed in, most competitive, most frequently playing should say well, for the overall health of the game, it's actually a better situation to have this happen at this speed. Right?
Sure.
So that's my personal take on that one.
Sure.
Fair answer?
Yeah, I don't disagree with that.
All right. Okay. Boy, we've went for a while. There's a lot of controversy. All right. Anything else you want to talk about? I got a couple more if you want to burn through them quickly. You want to do some quicker ones?
Sure.
The narrative of AoS.
What narrative?
That's right. Let's make that. That's my quick one.
What narrative?
Is that the joke?
It is.
Is it a problem at this point still? Is that actually still a controversy? Or have we solved this problem?
I still haven't figured out what the farmers are doing, but
I would assume. By the way, I would assume you actually have, because it's all bachelors are unmarried males. So you actually did just utter a sort of tautology by saying, I don't know what the farmers are doing. I do. Farming. You implicitly described them. But anyway, continue.
No, the joke there, by the way, is
to
go with that's where the Nurgle trees are coming from.
Sure.
He is a farmer. Ridiculous. I don't know. I don't feel connected to anything in the realms. That's what I'll say.
Huh. Interesting. Why? Can you unpack that some? I mean, nothing. Even your armies. You don't like the story of your KO theoretically or whatever. Take the rules to the side for a moment. You don't think that the narrative of them tracks for you? And is that because here? I have a question for you. Honest answer. Okay.
Yep.
Did you read the entire narrative in your KO book, stem to stern?
No.
Okay.
No. This is boring.
Okay. All right.
Sorry. There's a reason why I call it fluff. No,
I'm just trying to lay down your priors for everybody there.
Sure. Like, I think that part of this has to do with, like, and I know that people are going to disagree with me, and that's fine. I'm used to it. I think that there's an element of, like, named characters. Like, people need, like, figureheads to latch onto.
Okay. Do we not have enough of those yet?
I mean, in KO, we have Brock. He's my admiral.
That's fine. There's a lot of named people in the world.
Tell me about the name. Tell me about the name Frostlord in Beastclaw Raiders.
Well, they haven't gotten their new book, so I don't know what it'll be. But I'm sure they'll have a special character when it happens.
But that's my point, is that, like, I feel the dearth of named characters, even in factions that have named characters. So, I don't know, and maybe not. Maybe it doesn't matter. I think about Nurgle, and, like, I'm not attached to any of my named characters, and they have, like, 800 named characters.
They have, like, 8, yeah, they have all the named characters.
They have literally all the named characters. I mean, they don't have that many named dogs. That's Khorne. But, I don't know. I don't know what it is, but there's just something about it that is just not. And, like, I've read some of the novels. Like, that's been one of my push. Is, like, since March, I've been through, like, 3 books or something like that, including, like, City of Secrets, and I just, I don't, and maybe this is it. Like, I don't understand how the world works.
Okay.
Like, I saw City of Secrets, and everybody's trading in Glimmerlings, like prophecy shards.
Sure.
Okay.
Cool.
But, like, is that, like, how does that work with other realms? Do they value Glimmerlings? Do Glimmerlings work? Like, I know it sounds like super ridiculous for me to brace this.
No, they had an article. They actually wrote an article about this.
Did they?
Yeah. They wrote an article about the different currencies used by the different realms, and one of the challenges is the sort of conversion rate of these things across realm breaks.
It's amazing. I missed that White Dwarf.
It was like a community article.
It was a community article, and I'm trying to think of a way to articulate this. Maybe I'm just tired.
We've been going a while.
Yeah, I don't know. That's what I would say. I don't know. I just don't feel attached to the narrative, and, like, it's not for not trying. Like I said, I've been trying to read through, like, the Hallowed Knight stuff, and, like, I enjoy the books, but I just, I don't know.
That's fine.
Maybe I'm just getting old.
Well, that's undoubtedly true. But, yeah, I mean, I don't know. Here's what I'll say for me. I feel like it's not an issue anymore. Personal taste. This is going to be a very personal thing. Right? Because everybody is, like, if there was ever a controversy based on your own personal sense of sort of aesthetic, boy, is this it, right? It'd be very hard to grab objective things in this to even hold on to. But, like, when I look at this, I generally think I love the realms as a setting. I think they're a super cool idea. I think that, like, I love them way better than some dumb, pseudo-European, boring, repetitive fantasy equivalent that we've had 8 million clones of. The realms are interesting and varied and provide for, like, the imagination to run wild, which I like. They feel pretty. What are the realms? They're big, giant, they're big, giant dimensions that all interact in a complicated harmony. It's a metaphysical question. Like, does it matter? I don't know. Not to me. Like, again, my favorite setting in D&D, as I've said many times in the show, was Planescape. And, like, you can have visualizations of how the outer planes all, like, represent and interact with each other. That's not real. That's just visualizations of metaphysical concepts, right? In the same way that, like, no one in this who's watching this podcast or is going to comment could explain to me what the theoretically fourth dimensional edge of the universe actually looks like in a tactile sense, right? But, like, that's the universe we live in. I don't know how the heck that works, but it's there. the like what matters isn't like at that level. There's enough stuff grounded now. Like the malign portent shorts were great, gave you lots of insights into the world.
I love the malign portent shorts.
Yeah, I thought they were amazing. I thought they were perfect bite-sized little morsels of views into the world. There are cities. They work like cities, cities where cities are, where there are people and they do things. They have jobs and go to work. And there are monsters that attack sometimes. Feels much like anything else. But then there's also but then the realms are big enough to also have vast places of complete imagination and wonder that are just unlike anything else that's that's unlike anything in the real world, right? That just sends your imagination soaring. You can have giant rolling cogfort cities, and you can have places with clouds made of molten lead, and yet there are still places that are more friendly to civilization. Again, it feels very much like the Outer Planes did to me, and perhaps that's because one of the reasons I suspect that I'm comfortable with this is because I approached the Outer Planes in much the same way. There's places in the Outer Planes that are insane, you just don't go, and there are places where they're perfectly fine for people to live. And it's all sort of unpacking of metaphysical concepts, right? And a lot of the description on this is really healthy now. If you go into the novels, you can find really, really detailed stuff about, a lot of the main cities, right? That are sort of where the action takes place. Hammerhall and these other places. You can find really interesting descriptions of a lot of the realms in the various books. Where the armies operate tends to be very well described. How they operate tends to be very well described, right? The detail of how the beastmen work I thought was cool. It's sort of the different beastmen takes on how they view the world and where they hide and how they move around and how they view the chaos gods and how they view civilization and that kind of stuff. I thought that was all really, really good fluff that gave you cool insight into the world. So to me, that there's a lot of good stuff out there now that all groks. It makes sense. I can have both my normal fantasy, which shows up in Spear Shadows and a lot of Josh Reynolds novels, that feels like pretty traditional Warhammer fantasy. But I can also have just straight Mortal Realms craziness of rogue wizard bounty hunters chasing down endless spells across across lakes of frozen mercury. I keep using metal and other things because it's the realm of metal is endlessly fascinating to me. Shimon is so cool to me. I should get that neat idea. Shimon. I do think there's an interesting point that the lack of terrain could be influencing this. Sure. Right? Some people mentioned it in the comments. I think that's not a bad point. Maybe more terrain kits that give us more insights into the world.
Imagine a world where there were 7 terrain boxes malign sorcery that were let me change that. Remember the Giron the Veil of Giron box of 4
trees, just a bunch of dumb tree kits. Yes, I remember it.
Yeah. Imagine a world where you had $100 terrain boxes that had 4 or 5 distinctive realm things, and so you'd buy a Shimon box.
Yeah, sure.
So then you would get you could build a board of Shimon terrain.
That'd be awesome.
Something like that.
As long as they weren't just boxes full of dumb trees and they repacked.
No, that's what I'm saying.
I'm totally down with that.
They were terrain distinct to those spaces.
Yeah, that'd be cool as hell. Get out, man. I would dig that. And that does feel like it would go a long way to making people have the realms have a more visceral feel, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a winner. That's a winner for me. You're going to Hollywood. No, I like that one. I think that's a great idea. Because I do think that the narrative is out there, but we want to feel it on the tables, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. And by the way, the realm shouldn't be the only lens. They kind of talked about this in one of the recent Stormcast or whatever. They often want to view stuff through the realm, the lens of the realms, but that's not the only lens they should look through, right? And I very much agree with that, because one of the things that made, just to keep banging on Planescape, one of the things that made it fascinating was there was a lot of different lenses through which you could view the Outer Planes, right?
Yep.
You could view it through like the lenses of the factions, but also you could view it through the realm of like the religions that are out there and the gods, through the nature of alignment and the way the outer planes were arranged, right? All this kind of stuff gave you different lenses to look through, different ways to interpret what was going on.
Yep.
And I like that same idea. Like sometimes you get the army lens when somebody's spread across many realms. Sometimes you look at it through the realm lens of like how the realm has impacted things. Sometimes you could do more metaphysical concepts like what magic itself is doing, right? All of that seems like it would actually, like, being able to do lots of different takes and ways to view these things, I think has value. But those realm kits, that's a hot idea. I dig it.
Yeah, I wish.
Okay. Cool. That's it. There you go. That's the last one I had.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
All right. I have no idea why. Right now, the comments, by the way, are a very large discussion of the word hologram. So there you go. I said it.
No, I can't even see it. Get it? Because sorry. Yeah, I mean, I think the game's in a good state. That's what I'll say.
Yeah, overall, I think like to just bookend our initial statement, I think it's interesting that we can have these conversations, that most of these have some pros and cons and do have nuance to the discussion. It's not like we showed up here and said, this thing is 100% bad, other than the placement of Path to Glory. This thing is 100% bad, and it should be stricken immediately, and blah, 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 blah. Right?
Right.
I think that, like, for the most part, a lot of this stuff is open to discussion, interpretation. I think the growth of the game has been incredible. I think the community is awesome. I think for the most part, it's as I said, it is, to me, the best Warhammer's ever been. I think there are still, and I think that some of the reasons that these controversies will always persist is because most of them have some good and some bad. Some view them as positive, some view them as negative. And so there is no simple silver bullet to solve it. And I would hope that kind of like the point of this show would be to say, like, if you had a hard bias to one side of one of the things we've discussed,
right,
that's okay. Like, you can still believe and come down on one side of it. I'm not trying to say don't hold your sincerely held beliefs. If you believe it, great. But what I would argue is I hope that at least we've given you some food for thought to understand why somebody else would look at the same facts and have a completely different opinion than you and see value in it, right?
Right.
And so what we're really having a discussion about, which is much harder to quantify and much harder for them to make changes on, is what's the best for the overall long-term health of the game. And sometimes what's best for the overall health of the game might not be the best for some individual players. Sometimes you will get the short end of the stick based on, you know,
and a good example of that is weapon loadouts in a box. Like they need to return to that. Like they need, like, and I will acknowledge this, like they need to think about people buying that product for the first time. And the reality is that if they have to go outside that box, like there's a problem.
Sure. Yep. All right. So there you go. I feel like these are all resolved. So we did it. For the second time in as many months, we fixed Warhammer. Great. Awesome. It's been a real positive show.
You're welcome, GW.
There you go. All right. So that brings us to the end of our show. Fire Slayers will be next week, obviously, because, you know, it's Fire Slayers time. And so we'll pick up there. Yeah, they will.
But I've learned my lesson. I've learned that I can't highlight any of the things that are too broken, otherwise I'll be fixing the fact. So it'll be a cursory little overlook of the book. We won't get into heavy combos for another month.
Sounds great. Sounds great. That'll be a real thrilling show. All right. Well, to all of you who are watching, thank you so much. By the way, I do want to, like, one of the things I had asked initially was for everybody to keep it sort of civil and have fun commentary and discussion in the comments. And I want to say once again, the AoS audience and community proves it is the best, because, like, I've been watching the chat and it's been unbelievably good discussion. Just people making good nuanced points and having a fun discussion back and forth. So you continue to be the most awesome people in the world. And I love doing the show for all of you. And thank you for being really such a great community. So thank you very much for watching. As always, we appreciate it. We'll see you next Wednesday.